welcome. This morning we are here at the Rediscovery Centre virtually, and my name is Ed. I work here at the Rediscovery Centre, and we are delighted to bring you today our Fix It Festival. We have, well, first of all, if you haven't been to the Rediscovery Centre or this is your first time to engage with us, we are an environmental educational visitor centre, and we're the National Centre for the Circular Economy. And one thing that we are focusing on this month is repair. We've done a whole series around repair because the importance of repair within the circular economy is vitally important. We need to bridge the gap between us having the skills and the ability and the support to be able to repair our items, whether it's an electrical good or a piece of clothing or a piece of furniture. And that's what we're here to do today, is to try and help encourage people and help raise skills around repair. So we've done a few things so far this month. We have launched a series of short videos from people around the country sharing their knowledge and opinion on repair. Last week we launched an episode of our Ask the Expert, where our program manager for Rediscovery Fashion offered some tips that were sent in from our subscribers and our followers on Facebook, and we answered those questions. And then this week we had a circular economy conversation webinar where we discussed the right to repair with a panel of guests, including Minister Oisin Smith, and we were delighted with the reaction that we got from that. And here we are now today. So look, before we start, let me ask you some questions. Do you have a rocking chair that no longer rocks? Are you thinking of saying bye-bye to your bicycle? Do you ever think darn because you don't know how to darn? Does your vacuum suck because it doesn't suck? Well, hopefully we're going to be able to help you out today with some of those things. We've got a series of a few different workshops happening, and we want this to be as interactive as possible. So a few housekeeping things. Please interact through comments. If you have any questions, stick them in there and we'll get to them at some point as soon as we can. Feel free to turn your camera on and turn your mic on and actually ask a question. We want this to feel like you're here in this room, even though you can't be. We're looking forward to hosting this in person soon, but for now we want you to feel as much part of it as possible. So please do turn your camera and your mic on if you want to ask a question. And finally, I would just like to thank the Environmental Protection Agency, who are our partners throughout many of our campaigns. Specifically, they are partnering with us around all our repair events this month. So thank you very much to them for their support on all of this. So look, let's kick it off. Our first session is going to be with our own Audrey Rutherford. She is downstairs right now in our Rediscover Fashion studio, and she is going to talk about repair through the ages. So let me just add a spotlight to her there. Audrey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Ed. Hi, everybody.
Audrey, I'm going to hand over to you to take it over. You are the expert. You're going to talk us through some repair skills that you learned maybe from your own mother. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that, and tell us a little bit about what we should be constantly learning ourselves, and what will help us to repair those clothes that we might think they are beyond repair, and we might consider throwing them out, but actually it should be a lot easier to keep things in circulation, shouldn't it?
Exactly, absolutely, Ed. And I mean, mending is not a new thing, or repairing is not a new thing. It was trending, mending was trending, and that rhymes. Was a long time before the COVID-19 pandemic locked us down and changed the way we ran our days, kind of. A resurgence of kind of domestic handicrafts was reclaimed by the feminists in the late 90s, elevated by visual artists in the 2000s onwards. And this happened kind of concurrently with the sea change in consumerism known as fast fashion, which, as you probably know, is a global buying frenzy with disastrous human and environmental repercussions. And so I'm going to take you back to the 1940s, if you'd like to join me, and particularly to the work of my mother, who was a great mender, and who in the 1940s, because there was great shortages of fabric and food even, everything was kind of rationed. Clothes were very valuable items, and they had good clothes and work clothes, so everybody knew how to repair their clothes. So in my mother's era, she was 11 when she made these pieces here, which I'll show you in detail in a few moments. She was 11 in school. I think it was called domestic science at the time, and I suppose in some way it was a way of keeping women at home and useful, you know, knowing how to sew. But it was a great hand-me-down, and I think nowadays those skills might not be handed down so much through generations because we have YouTube, we have lots of books, we have lots of different options available to us now, which is absolutely fantastic. But I think handing down the skills is also brilliant. So come a little bit closer here. Gráinne's my camera woman today. Thank you, Gráinne. And she's all masked up, so she won't get too close to me. So some of the stitches here in this one are going to be, and actually I'll use a pencil to show you up closer, would be the slip stitch, the running stitch, and there's no back stitch there actually, but this was done in 1946. If you get an overall look at those, Gráinne, you'll see how beautiful they all are and the fabrics that they used and the detail that was used. For example, here's a pleated little skirt she had done. So she would have had to be used very fine detail for all her sewing. There's a slip stitch in here as well that you'll see. I will do 4 stitches with you later on after I show you these. Look how beautiful these visual darning pieces are. So basically they were thought that, I mean, there was lots of wool used then, it was a natural fabric. There was lots of woolen mills in Ireland, so people had to mend their jumpers. It was very important because they were expensive. So this is a visible mending, which I think is rather beautiful. It actually looks like a brooch now. You can see the detail on that. So my mum, Anna, did that when she was 11 years of age. Isn't it just beautiful, I think? And it has really stood the test of time. So if that was still on a jumper, it would still be minding the hole that had happened in that jumper. The same with this kind of one is almost like, and she has it on a green shield stamp piece of paper that some people might remember. This was in the 1940s as well, and you can see how detailed and beautiful the stitches are. This would be darning as well on a jumper, although that's more of a kind of a cotton material. Buttonholing was very important, not just how to sew a button on, but actually how to make buttonholes. So you can see the detail of that, of the buttonhole. You can, thanks Gráinne, and Gráinne has a mask on there, so we're safe. So the buttonhole stitch, which is quite similar, if not almost the same as a blanket stitch, which is what I'm going to show you later on. This one was done on the 5th of the 4th, 1948. And you can see the detail around this patch. So she would have done, practiced the slip stitch around here, and then she has kind of a hidden stitch around the edge. And so you can see the neatness. I'm sure it was insisted that they were neat. It's a little bit stained now because it is quite an old piece, as they all are. There's some more buttonholes, as you can see. So obviously they spent a lot of time needing to know how to make buttonholes in the 1940s. And I suppose in those days, unlike now, fabric was expensive and it was important to really know how to mend and repair everything you had. Also here she has done the slip stitch. This was done in 1948. So at that stage she would have, well, she was born in 1935, so we have to work that out. So slip stitch again, all the way across, very fine, small little detail. And then she has the button stitch here as well for buttonholes. As you can see, it fits through. This is where your button is going to fit through. Perfectly done. So if you can get an overview of those together, Gráinne. She has the blanket stitch there, as you can see it around here, and the beautiful fabrics, like so beautiful, and it would be cotton that would have been used again and again and again. So we spent a lot of time at home. We had a sewing basket at home, and everything we needed was there. Needles, every kind of thread, scissors, thimbles, everything that was needed. And I mean, we still have that sewing basket today, and it was in great condition, and we really had to look after it. The needles were counted to make sure we replaced everything. It was like, basically it was a textile workshop, is what was going on. And you can see these frames today. Actually, Dave very kindly made all of these frames in our furniture workshop from pallets, and they're really beautiful pieces. I really like them. So what I'm going to do for you today is 4 basic sewing stitches. Some of you might already know them, but I think they're very useful. I mean, you don't have to have a sewing machine. You don't have to go to any great expense. You can get a little sewing kit. I began to put sewing kits together upstairs in the Eco store. And actually you can take as much thread as you want. You can take what needle you want. So you only have to take what you want for an individual repair, which I just think is fantastic. So the first stitch I'm going to do with you is called the back stitch. Now I have to put on my glasses because I'm a bit blind as a bat really. So I've used a blue thread. So I've used white just for the purpose so that you can see today, okay? This is actually calico. But this kind of stitch, the back stitch can be used just to quickly, just say you were out and about and all of a sudden the hem came down on your dress and you had a spare little kit with you. This will hold you up for the day until you get home or whatever. So it's very basic. You're threading your needle, which I've already done. And you put a knot in the end of it like that. I'm sure you can see, and I cut off the little excess. So now I'm going to have to do it away from myself to show you. So it's so basic.
Audrey, can I interrupt with a quick question?
Yes.
Barbara just wants to know, is the slip stitch the same as the hemming stitch?
Yes, it would be. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so the running stitch. The running stitch is just basically what it says. What I have done actually as well, just to mention, I usually get for this purpose, for practice, and it's good if you want to practice, is just draw a little ruler line across with a pencil so that you can keep your line fairly straight, but you don't have to keep it straight. It's going to still keep it in one place. Now let me see if you can see me there. So I'm going to go back in there again. So try and have the same size of a stitch if you can. Don't have to. I'm wondering how many of you actually have actually repair classes in school or mending classes in schools. Today, I'm not sure if children are doing mending or sewing in schools, but I think it's an invaluable craft. And there's so much that can be done with it. I'm going to do a few more stitches there to let you see what I'm doing. They're very, now this is kind of, I won't call it a loose stitch, but it's also a very temporary stitch that tailors would use when they're putting together suits and things or special clothes for people, just to temporarily put them, because it's very easy to undo. And you can hold things together rather than using pins as well. So that's the running stitch. I'm going to show you it finished because it's really kind of nice. I mean, you could do all kinds of craft things with it. So to finish it, show you there. That's what the running stitch looks like. Isn't it really nice? I mean, it's basic, but I love basic things. So to finish it off, you can do it in lots of ways. Like, go back into the previous stitch, in around like that behind.
So Audrey, give me an example of when you'd use this.
Yeah, I was saying, Ed, like you can use it basically for anything, to put two things together temporarily, because it's not a very strong stitch. But as I said, tailors use it to temporarily put pieces together. You know, when somebody tries on a suit, they might do a running stitch. I mean, it's after putting those two pieces together there, as you can see, and it's fine, especially because there's knots. But before you tie it, if you wanted to pleat it, you could as well. Now I've tied a knot in it, so I can't pleat it, but you can pull that thread and then you're going to have a pleat, or a gather, I should say, and then you can tie the knot. I really like that one. See that, how it is there in the middle? It is really kind of firm. So that's called the back stitch. And it's a very useful one. Any needle, any thread, and all you really need is needle and thread, scissors if you have it. I used to actually bite with my teeth, which isn't very hygienic, particularly at the moment. Right, the next one I'm going to do is the back stitch. Now it's kind of similar to the running stitch, except you do what it says on the tin. You go back over what you've done, which is basically making it a much stronger stitch. So it's much more permanent. But I suppose like everything else, it can all be undone with a ripper. But you start off the same as well. So we're just going to, we have a needle thread. I've already thread because it would take me so long with my eyesight to thread a needle. A good tip for threading a needle, if you find it difficult, is to do it with a white background and put the needle hole in the front of it, and you can see the hole much more clearly then. Okay, so the back stitch, you start again like the running stitch. Okay, so there we go, like that. So it's held firmly in place with the knot. So then we go back into the first little stitch there, or the end of the first stitch, which I am doing because I'm trying to show you at the same time. Okay, you see that? And then we go into the next one. Can you see that there? I'm not kind of sure how you can see it. You pull that through, oops. See the way it's joined much closer together. So then we go back in to that previous end of stitch. And we go again to the next one. And then we go back in again. So this is called the back stitch. And this one can be used for much the same as the running stitch. Can you see me there? I'm going to get closer. Can you see there, cameraman, or camera woman, or do I need to do something different? Can you see? I'll give you a good look at that there. There might be a bit of a light shining on it.
I think we can see as best we can, Audrey, thanks.
Okay, and then we go in here again. I'm just going to finish off this line and show you what it looks like. So this is the back stitch, and it's kind of quite a strong stitch. Won't be as straight as it should be because I am kind of looking at it at a different angle, but usually you'd have it on the table. So, I mean, if you had more time, you could do this one. If you were in a hurry and on the run, you could use the running stitch. Okay. Again, we're going to go down. And they really like nice because, like, if you decided to get all fancy with this, you could be doing it vertically and horizontally and kind of diagonally, and you'd be left with a really nice kind of pattern without having any fancy stitch, you know, because all the stitches are kind of basic. It's just how we lay them out, really. So it's good to experiment. And I suppose that's what the visual artists did. They started experimenting with mending and thread. There's different thicknesses of thread. And this one is just a standard one. I mean, with this kind of thing, if it's a mending project and it's not a very, let's say denim or something, you don't need a very strong thread if it's kind of cotton. Because the stronger the thread, it's kind of a bit thicker, you're going to need a wider eye of the needle. Okay, so we're just going to finish that off kind of in the same way. So we're going behind there. We go behind, pick up a little bit of fabric, put the needle into the hoop like that. I think it's good to do it two or three times, like as many times as you want. And I'm just going to snip that off and show you the difference. I have little snippers here. I really like the snippers, but you can use anything that any little scissors that you have at home. So there's a difference between the two of those, which is the running stitch and the back stitch. Can you see those two? It's just a difference in gap and strength. And if I'm to open that one, it's kind of much stronger, okay? So the next one I'm going to do is the blanket stitch, which is actually my favorite. I think it makes a beautiful edge. It doesn't have to be for a blanket. I mean, I use it on the edge of kind of little Christmas decorations and things like that. So basically you get two pieces of fabric together, and you go into the front part of it. I've kind of used a beautiful color. You see these beautiful colors over here, Grania? And they're just fantastic. These were donated to us. And so I'm using this Really beautiful color. I think it's fabulous color. They're really fine pieces, almost silk-like, but they are kind of a mix of silk and wool, I think. So what you do is you get your piece, which is 2 pieces that you're going to sew together. So let's pretend it's a blanket for argument's sake. So with an edge that needs to be, to stop it from fraying. So we go into the front part of it like that. See that there? Okay. And then what we do is we go around the back into that hole again, as best we can. Now this is a darning needle, so it is a little bit more tough to get through fabric. You don't have to use a darning needle, but for thicker thread, like you really have to. There are needles for, particularly for thread, and I should have one here to show you somewhere. It's kind of an end on it. Actually, there is, it's missing there. But basically the one for wool has kind of a sharp, flat edge on it. So then what we do is we go into that hoop from behind. So that's the first stitch, okay? It's kind of going to be, so then the next stitch, you can draw a line for this as well, like a pencil line to keep you straight, because you kind of need, the gap from there to there should be the same all along. You see that? I'll point with my pencil. So the gap from there to there should be the same, and the length from there to there should be the same, to make it really neat. But I mean, it takes a bit of practice, like for me as well. So what you do is you leave it at the loop and you go under that loop like that. So I'll show you a few more to get the gist of it. So you go from front to back, kind of the same amount. Now, if you want to be very particular, let's say very particular, Gráinne, could you come down here a little bit? And I'm going to show people, like you could get them, I have a ruler here. And what you could do is mark off where you want the needle to come out. So they're going to be the same height and the same width, okay? So we go behind again. I think I'll stay down here. I think you can see me there, Gráinne. And so we go into this one. Might not be exactly the same length, okay? We go in there. We go in behind that loop. Okay, and it's my favorite stitch because it's really pretty and it puts a lovely finish. So the same again. So, I mean, you can use it as a decoration. It doesn't even have to be for mending, but we're talking about mending today, so it is for mending, but it can be used. It's, you know, all of these stitches, as I said, once you get the basics, you can just play around with them, you know. So back to front, go under the loop from behind. We're getting there. I'll show you a little bit when I have this done. Back to front and go under the loop on the back. Back to front again. Go under the loop from behind. And it's such a beautiful stitch that it looks so complicated, but it's really not. Back to front, under the loop. Back to front. You can do this around cushions as well.
Audrey, we probably only have about 5 minutes left now at this stage in this particular session.
Okay.
So guys, for everybody who's watching, I hope you're enjoying it so far. If you have any questions or any requests or any particular stitches you'd like to ask about or see a little bit about, we've got about 5 minutes in this. Now, Audrey will be around later on at 1 o'clock for our session, our virtual repair cafe, essentially. So she'll be able to answer more questions then. But if you've got any questions right now, please send them through. Otherwise, Audrey will just show you a couple of other ones.
I'm just going to quickly show you a very important one, which is the invisible stitch. And I think it's brilliant if you have a cushion that has a hole in it. Let's say pretend this is a cushion. So you just knot the needle as well. I have a double thread. So basically all you do is go horizontally, one side, okay, like that. And then go across diagonally, do horizontally again. It's called the lather stitch. I call it as well. I know it's called the invisible kind of stitch, but it is like a ladder when you see it. So if I don't pull it too tight, you'll see that it's like a ladder. So you keep going horizontally and then vertically across, but go vertically across like that, you know, at the same position. Okay, so there we go with that. So I'm just going to, then you have to just pull it taut. So it's invisible there then. So then you can do your cushion and have your nice, can't see any seam whatsoever. So that's perfect for kind of any kind of things that you want to. It's actually good for making jeans smaller if you feel like they're too large. You can do an invisible stitch. So it's horizontally, and then we go across vertically and horizontally again. It's really a simple stitch. And then to finish it off, you just do, you tie it off at the very end. We go under the loop again and tie it off. But be sure you have it all taut before you, because otherwise it won't be invisible. See there? Okay, and that's all my stitches for you today. I hope you enjoy that.
Yeah, so just a question there from Tina there. That's not a question, hang on, I've lost sorry. Barbara asked, is that the same as top stitching?
This one, no, that's not the same as top stitching. Top stitching would more be like an invisible stitch, I think. I'm not an expert on it, but that wouldn't be top. That's an invisible ladder stitch. Okay, and what stitch would be used to attach a patch? Kate wants to know. As I said, once you learn the basics, you can, if you want a visible patch, you can use all of those visible stitches. If you want an invisible stitch for a patch, you can do what I have showed you there, which is hiding the patch and pulling it in very closely. There's also another way to fix a patch would be embroider it horizontally and vertically, like my mother's one here. I think that's really beautiful for a patch. And you can see the way it's done, just, and then you go in and out underneath like that. And then the same going upwards, and then you're left with that lovely kind of a patch. But you can use any of those stitches for patches, depends on the look you want. Super. Thanks very much, Audrey. And a few people are saying thanks in the chat as well. So like, look at 20 minutes, half an hour isn't enough to even scratch the surface of these kind of things, is it, Audrey? So what kind of plans have we got for the future, both online and when we're allowed to do things back in person again, which is hopefully sooner rather than later? What do we hope to do? In the Rediscovery Centre, we hope to have a repair cafe going forward at some stage. And also I have repair kits upstairs that people, as I said, can come in and I can show them how to repair. We have a sewing machine up there as well. And I can show them the basic stitches and they can write in anytime if they need information about repairing, because I'm passionate about repairing. And particularly when you're buying, clothes in charity shops, a lot of them need a bit of repair. So it's great to be able to buy them and repair. So we've loads of plans for the Eco Store and the Rediscovery Centre. So come in and see us and find out. Yeah, and Mark asked, do we do sewing classes? Yeah, we regularly do. We've got 4 main workshops that we do classes in, and fashion's one of them. The others are education, furniture, and cycling. But as Audrey said, like, just pop in any day or send us a message. But if you go to rediscoverycentre.ie, you'll see some of the courses that we have, and we hope to have more kind of open events like this where people can drop in and have a chat with Audrey one-on-one rather than online, because it's always that bit more difficult virtually. So great. Unless there's any, let me have a look and see if there's any more questions here. Look, Audrey will be back at 1 o'clock. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break, just a quick comfort break, and we're going to be back at 1:45 with Dave, who's in our furniture workshop at the moment, and he's going to talk through some handy, quick repairs for any of the buckety furniture you might have in your house. So thanks very much, guys, for tuning in so far, and see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Bye. We'll go to a quick ad break. Okay, welcome back, everybody.
This is our second session here at the Rediscovery Centre's Fix It Festival. Big thanks again to the EPA for partnering with us to bring you a series of repair events throughout June. And our next session now is going to be with our very own Dave, who looks very willing, eager, raring to go down in our furniture workshop. Can you hear me okay, Dave? Can't hear you, Dave.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can hear you now.
Yeah, good stuff. I was whispering the first time.
Yeah. Shout nice and loud there, Dave, so we can all hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah.
1, 2. Yeah, very good.
Good. Thanks, Dave. So Dave, furniture repairs. Look, there's things we all have in our house that can be a little bit loose and can have cracks and chips and so forth in it. And you're going to take us through now for the next half hour as big of an overview as you can about quick tips for any of those little issues that we all might encounter. And guys, we're doing this for you guys who are here. Thank you so much for turning up this morning when there's so many other nice things to do on a lovely June Saturday. We're delighted to have so many people here tuned in, but we want you to be as active as possible. So don't be afraid to turn that mic on and ask a question and talk to Dave, or if you're feeling like you'd rather put a text into the chat, then feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Dave will be around later on as well at 1 o'clock for our panel discussion, so you can save questions for then if you like. But for now, Dave, give us some with some tips, please.
Wow, some tips. Right, well, first of all, good morning, everybody. I'm very welcome to the Rediscovery Centre here in Ballymun. Granny's doing camera this morning, and we're all social distance, and we're wearing masks with Granny's and all that sort of stuff. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is fillers, okay? Now, basically, there's 3 types of fillers. There's a wood filler, there's this sort of poly filler that you get in various brands, and there is the caulk, okay? Now, these are the 3 main types that you'd find around the house that you'd be using for your projects. We do the caulk firstly. The caulk that you would use for going down cracks down the side of wardrobes or down the side of walls, this is ideal because you can paint this, okay? The one thing you do not use is silicone, and a lot of people make that mistake by filling down the cracks with silicone. Silicone is not paintable. In other words, paint will not adhere to silicone. So it's bad advice to use silicone. Always use the caulk and a light rub of the finger down. And the best way to use caulk, incidentally, is to have a little bowl of water beside you. And when you run your caulk down your mastic gun, get your thumb and stick it into the water and just run it down, or your finger, and that keeps everything nice and neat. The other way to do that would be to take an old bottle of spray out of the kitchen sink from the wife and empty it empty it out and put water into it and spray the actual area that you're caulking. And the same works with silicone actually, and just rub your finger along it down, and that keeps everything nice and clean, right? The next thing you would have in relation to fillers would be a pre-made filler. Now this a particular brand, and this is actually pre-made and it's in the tin there, okay? But this is not great for filling huge, sort of very large areas, cracks and holes, because you've got to build this up basically. And when you're building it up, you have to sand it down, build it up. So this is not a great one to use for very large areas. If you do have a very large area to fill, this particular wood filler is a 2-part. Okay, I'll just take the lid off that there for you. It's a 2-part filler. It has a hardener, okay, and this is the actual filler itself. So a golf ball size of this filler and a pea size of this filler, that's the ratio you would use. And that's very, very important, because if you mix too much of the hardener into it, it'll just go rock hard in no time, and you'll find you'll be throwing it out. So a golf ball size of this filler and a pea size of the hardener, mix it up, okay? And that will give you a good consistency. And then what you can do is you can still hold, and I just took here, actually, a piece of timber. You can see the gouge over there, that piece of timber, just to show you the properties of that wood filler, which is because it goes really, 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 very hard. So you see it there, that gouge is over. If you look at the other end, that corner there has been filled with that filler, and I'll bring it right up to you. You can actually see the filler there in the corner, and it's a lovely shape, the shape of the timber itself. And as you can see there, it's when it hardens up, you just sand it down, okay? Sand it down. You can see it there. So you can see the gouge there end. You see it here at that end, and that's paintable, and that's particularly good in relation to if you have windows, guys, you know your windowsills in the outside, if you're in a fairly old house and you don't want to change your windows to UPC or aluminium, and you want to try and keep the windows, this stuff is ideal for fixing your windowsills. You can cut away the bad piece, put some of this in, sand it down. It goes rock hard like cement, and it's paintable, as I said earlier on. Okay, so there are your three main fillers. Okay, now in relation to filling holes and cracks, what you would need obviously is somewhere to put your filler on. Now, powder fillers, personally myself, I preference these because you have great control over this filler. Whereas you use the pre-mixed ones, you don't have a lot of control over this, okay? Because you're putting it in now, and of course the trick is when you do the filling, walk away from it, okay? Leave it, let it set. Don't be tempted to go back and stick your finger in and see is it dry. Just let it set, let it walk away, and then you can sand it down. And we'll go through the sandpapers now in a little while. Now, as I say, this powder filler, okay? The ideal way to use this would be, if it's a large area, top the paint lid, your paint lid off your tin. The reason this is so good actually is because you see the sides, the way that they're raised. When you put your powder on and you put your little volcano and you put your water in to mix your filler, the water doesn't go everywhere, doesn't go all over the floor, doesn't go all over the tabletop where you're mixing. The raised sides in this lid will stop all that. So very, very, very good tip, okay? The other thing I'll say to you in relation to fillers is if you have a lot of sealant to fill, okay, and you've very, very typical problem with sealants in houses is that the slab nails have popped, okay, particularly in old houses where the traffic upstairs walking will actually loosen up the slabs underneath over time, and the nails actually pop. And when the nail pops, I'm sure you've seen it, the little nails, you don't actually see the nail, but the actual plaster will pop out of the ceiling and you have a little hole, okay? The reason for that basically is, very quickly, is many years ago in buildings, they used a thing called herringbone bridging. And herringbone bridging, when they used two pieces of timber in between the joists, they were like that, like an X. So when the floor moved, the joist moved with it. So then in later times, in modern times, they decided to use for bridging, which was just actually solid timber. Timber shrinks, as you know. When timber shrinks, you get creaks in your floor. Simple, but it's just a lazy way, I would say, in construction of going modern isn't always the best way. Sometimes the old ways are the best. So herringbone bridging, can't go wrong. You have your holes in your ceiling, you want to fill them. Just say, for argument's sake, you have quite a lot of holes in the ceiling, you want to fill them. Filler, and you would be using something like this, like the powder filler. This actually goes white when it dries out, okay? So you're looking at your ceiling, you will see a few of them, but you don't, and you'll just go blind, paint blind after a while, looking for them all. A very, very quick tip, I'm just going to have a shot here for 2 seconds. A very quick tip, when you are doing mixing up your filler, okay, go into the kitchen, and again, you're going back to the wife, and you're getting, or wherever, whoever is master of the kitchen, and you're getting some of our color dye for food dye. A tiny drop of food dye into your filler as you're mixing it up will color it. You put it on the ceiling, you can see where you filled, okay? Very, very easy, very quick tip and very easy. And that way, and it won't make any difference to the filler, doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Tiny drop of color, food color into your filler when in areas that you think you're not going to get, and particularly sealants. Right, so we're going to mix a bit of filler now. And this is powder filler, all right? And the ratio for this particular one, some of them are 2 to 1, some of them are 3 to 1. This one here is actually a quick second one, it's 3 to 1, okay? So what I would say to you is, if it's a small area, get a little tub. There's no need to get a big, put on a big piece of timber. Get a little tub and mix it up, okay? So I'm going to mix this filler here. I don't know if you can see it here now. Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Barney. I'm going to mix this now, right? So here you have, and we're just putting our filler into the water. And don't throw it all in at once, okay? And what you're looking for is a consistency, okay? And then just keep doing it on your. Now, just take it easy with this. You're not baking a cake, you're only just doing a bit of filling. Now, there we go. In fact, there's probably too much water in that. We're going to get another wee bit of filler in there. Where's my little, there we go. We just need a wee bit more actually. Filler there into that, just a tiny bit. Okay, we are getting there. And when you're filling your walls, the first thing you have to do, guys, is just dust out the area where you're going to fill, okay? If you dust out the area where you're going to fill, just takes all the loose particles out of the way. I'm just getting more water here now. Just want to get this right because I need this. It's important that I show you this.
Dave, how do you know not to go too thick with it?
You'll see the consistency as I'm mixing it up here, Ed. This particular one actually, this one's actually the 3-to-1, because I thought it was actually the 2-to-1. It's the wrong one that I brought in. No. I said to you earlier on, the trick is to let it dry. Let it dry when you offer up to the wall. That's getting, see that consistency, very much like baking a cake. You have that sort of when it's that thickness with your dough. Same sort of consistency. Not that I'm any good in the kitchen now. I'm just gonna throw that excess there as well, just to stay nice and clean. Right, guys, if we go around there, that wall. Right, now I'm just going to throw this out onto this board here. Okay. That's all maybe that. Now, so you have your filler mixed.
Dave?
Yes, sir.
Just before you do that, just a quick question there from Kate. When you're working with the powder filler, can you keep adding water as it dries out?
Not a great idea, because when you're adding the water, like the consistency of it will just go very watery. Okay, so you gauge what you need basically, and mix up. You'll know, like, you know, as you start, you know how much you need, and just mix up till you get that consistency. But I wouldn't keep adding water because it'll take longer to dry out. After you keep adding water. You know what I'm saying to you? So if you have this is a knife, right? This is your filling knife, right? This is bendable. You see the way that's very flexible knife. This one's a bit more rigid because it's a 3-inch knife. So basically, get your knife, put your filler onto it, right? And then you can build up the consistency as well by using the 2 knives. And you have great control this way. Whereas if you had a piece of timber in your hand, you're going around, you're cleaning off the edges of it. So we're just going to go around to our imaginary wall around here, guys. So just imagine now this is your sitting room wall. You had an electrician in and he's put a big hole in the wall and you fill it. So what you do is basically you build up your consistency with your filler, right? The very first thing you do actually is you make sure, just clean out the dust. Now, just imagine that this is a sitting room wall. Clean out the dust out of the wall, okay? Out your few bits, right? And you're going to apply your filler. Okay, and then we're going little hole there, little hole there. Leave a bit on it so that you can sand it down, guys. Now, what I'll say to you is in relation to filling this hole, okay? I'm going to show you this now, and I hope I can demonstrate this. So this gouge is here, and you go back and you fill it, and you're trying to level it, and you're like this, and you're pulling this, you're pulling the filler back out. The way to do it is very simply. If you have a wall, okay, you have a wall that you want to fill, get yourself another knife, you have one, dip it in water. In other words, you're wetting the knife, and basically that's the middle of it. Go to the middle of your thing and go down, okay, and go up. So work from the middle. So you're not pulling that out then. So up and down, walk away from that and let it dry. There's no need to go near it. Just let it dry. Okay, so that's your filling all done. So I would leave that for a few hours. If it's timber, okay, that you're filling, you will need obviously the different grades of sandpaper. And very quickly, how you know the different grades of sandpaper is, if it's rough, it's tough. 120, okay, is very, very rough, right? 80 is even rougher, okay? So you'll know by the back, the number on the back that says P120, you know that is 120 grit, okay? That's quite rough. This is P100, see the back of it there? That's even less. And this one here actually is P220, so that's quite smooth, okay? That's what you need on your walls, basically. You don't need to go mad with heavy sandpaper. Always an idea to have a sanding block. If you haven't got a sanding block, a piece of timber, anything, something that you can wrap around, okay, into the palm of your hand, right? And that gives you a flat surface, and then you can sand up and down. Okay, when that's dry, sand up and down, and that will actually go quite smooth. But the trick is, as I said earlier on, walk away from it, let it dry. Okay, is that okay? So sand up and down. All right. If you're sanding timber, very important, I should say to you, and I'm going to show you here on this one. And actually, I want to do it with a piece of work to show you. If you're sanding timber, this is a locker we got in recently, and we're actually just upcycling for a lady. And if you do have a sanding block, there's two sides to the sanding block. Okay, you see the way it's chamfered there? That's the side that the sandpaper goes on, so it fits around neatly. When you're sanding your timber, okay, is up and down. And you can see what I'm doing there. I'm actually going with the grain, okay? So in effect, when you going up and down, so in effect, so if I put my hand in water here and rub that, right, and just imagine that's, just to give you an idea, right, that'll be lovely and smooth. However, if you have the sandpaper in your hand and you go like this, you're going against the grain, and you'll see marks in the timber. It won't be smooth like the top. Okay, you'll see the marks going across it there. They come out through, when that dries out, the marks will come out through the scrape marks will come out through the varnish when it's finished. All right. There's an old saying in painting, you can see with your eyes, and the carpentry. Basically, that means your hands are your eyes. By touch, you can actually feel smooth areas. You can feel lumps in the timber. You'll know where to smooth. Sometimes you don't see it with your eyes, but with your hands, you'll actually feel it. Okay, very important. You'll feel it. So when you do put a final coat of varnish or paint, wherever, it'll be lovely and smooth. Because the very, very thing that I should have said at the very start of this session was the key to any woodwork or any project is absolutely preparation. Preparation. Because if you do not do your preparation, you won't get a good finish. Okay. Preparation sometimes takes time. It's well worth it because your final product will really, really look well. Okay. So preparation, get your tools ready. They're not expensive tools to buy. Not you see here today is quite inexpensive. Okay. And they're very, very easily got. So the next thing we're going to do if that's okay with you guys. So that's your paint, you're filling, okay? You're filling your hole in that. Yes, sir.
I might just cover a couple of questions here before you move on. Fiona just wanted some clarification on the P number. Is it the higher, the smoother, or what's the rule generally?
Okay, so if you remember this rule, the rougher, the tougher. If it's rough sandpaper, it's the lower number. So P80 or P60 is very, very rough, okay? So very, very rough sandpaper. Go up to 220. I'll just show you again here. Just go by Brian. Sorry, no.
So 220 would be the smoothest then?
No, the smoother than 220. It's just when I had the hand this morning in my hand. That's P220, and it's very light. It's very smooth. Okay.
So the higher the P number, the smoother the sandpaper.
The higher the P number, the smoother. You can see that one there. It's quite rough. See, that's P120. You see, you can almost see the grit on it. If I hold it, see it there? Hold the two of them up together.
Great.
If that's okay. So,
and Dave, just one more thing. Could you just clarify your tip for using food coloring again? What was the purpose for that?
Oh yes. If you have lots of holes in the ceiling, in your ceiling, most ceilings are white. Now, not every ceiling is white, but most people would put white emulsion on their ceilings. So if you're doing up your room and you find there's cracks that need to be filled in and there's holes need to be filled in, most filler will go white when it's dried out. And sometimes it's hard to see them. Do you know what I mean? Hard to see the holes you filled. But particularly there's quite a lot of them. So you don't want to miss any. And the one way to do that is to put a tiny drop of food colorant, mix it in when you're mixing your filler, mix it in, or just a tiny drop. And all it does is just colors. It just gives the filler a slight color, so that when you do put it up in the ceiling, you'll actually see it. Like if it was red or yellow, doesn't matter. You'll see it, and you'll know where to sand down basically before you paint. That make sense? I
think so. Thank you, Dave.
No problem. Okay. Right. Just give me 2 seconds now, and we move on to the next. Right now. Here we have a 3-drawer bedside locker. As I say, we got in for to be fixed and painted up. And straight away, as you can see here, from this is top drawer. It's actually just the reason for this is because the runner is missing outside here. Okay. 2 of the drawers that were here in this unit, also the sides are broken. That's a side piece. That's this piece here. On the other side, it's actually in half. Okay, so we need to fix that. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix this drawer. We're going to show you how to do that. And the other thing, big thing here was the handles. The 3 handles actually were just coming away from the front. They're not tight enough. So I'll show you how to bore them and how to glue them with a little dowel and how to cut them off and then pre-drill them and put them back on. Okay. So the very first thing we need to do is obviously fix the side of that drawer. Again, like you don't have. I'm sure like a lot of DIY enthusiasts wouldn't have accessibility to G clamps and all those sort of clamps. A very, very simple way of gluing up your drawer, I'll show it to you now, is basically you're going to need some white PVA glue. Okay. Wrong way around. White PVA glue. Okay. And you can get a waterproof version of that as well, by the way. And we're going to glue this drawer. So now, just by gluing it, okay, and putting it down on the hard surface, it's not going to really, it will adhere, but it won't be that tight. So I'll just show you very quickly how to do that. Get a bit of masking tape, and the reason I'm using masking tape, right, is, can you see that there, Bill? Put masking tape on one side, okay? And the reason I'm using the masking tape is because I'm going to glue this with PVA glue, and I'm going to put it down on this little jig. I don't know if you can see this jig. This is just a scrap of timber, basically. Scrap of timber with two rails on it, screwed down. Any bit of timber at all, it doesn't matter what it is, okay? And a set of folding wedges, very easily made, extremely easy to make. All you do is just get a piece of timber like that, okay? You have any old piece of timber at all, and basically just draw a diagonal line from one side to the other and cut it, and you have 2 wedges. Okay, very simple, very quick. Timber was around way before steel was. There's always a way with timber. So here we go. What I would say to you is when you're using PVA glue is a lot of people would just use it out of the bottle. Personally, myself, I love the idea of just putting it into a little tub. Okay, that way you've control over it. Get you a little brush. All right, and what we're going to do now is we are going to show you there. We're going to put glue. We've already cleaned this off now. I should have said that in the beginning. We're going to just put a glue all along that line there with the brush. Okay, the other way, as I said to you earlier on, if you don't put it into a little pot like that, you have the bottle like this and you're flying along, it's going everywhere. You have control over it when you're doing it this way. Okay, and then obviously the opposite side, more glue on that. Glue all the way along there. All right. Okay. Just need a wee bit there, and we're just ready to go. So put that aside. Right. Now, and you'll see it'll become apparent the reason why we used it. See, that's the bottom. Why I put the masking tape is because you're going to put that down on this surface here. Okay. And you're going to stick the 2 of them together. The masking tape is underneath now. Right. And the reason for the masking tape is, anybody? The reason for the masking tape is so that the side of the drawer will not stick to that surface when you take away the wedges. Okay, does that make sense? So you have glue on the back of it. There's the masking tape. If you didn't put that masking tape on and you glue this up, the drawer would actually stick to that surface. So the reason you're putting that on is for that reason and that reason alone. Now, 2 folding wedges. You can see there, very gently. You don't go mad. It's on. Okay. Put the folding wedges in there. You have your hard surface this side, and make sure that's lined up there, nice and neatly. Okay. And basically, all you're doing is just pressing it. You don't have to even hand title do it. Just press those wedges in. Okay. If you want, you can give a slight tap or a hammer, but there's no need really. Just clean off the excess glue. And it's important now in this situation to clean up the excess glue, and the reason for that is because this is actually that's part of the drawer runner. So any old cloth at all, a bit of a knife, run it down there, get that glue out there. Now, if Grani can hold that camera up there, you can't even see that joint. You can't even see the joint. Can you see it there? The joint's completely gone because it's tight, nice and tight. So you put that aside basically, right? Let it dry, okay? And I'll just show you one. Here's one we done earlier.
But Dave, is that glue strong enough to hold that now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's quite strong stuff. The PVA glue, quite strong, and that's the drawer that's off. So that's going to dry, basically, and that'll go off in about an hour. But I'd leave for a couple of hours. It's not like you're not in a rush. Now, so I'll just show you. This drawer was actually exactly the same. Okay. And what we did was we put the dowels, we made dowels for the front of it, and we screwed in the back, we glued and screwed that part. So that was in half as well. We glued that together. And instead of a lot of these units are made of mass production and they only use staples. Okay. So what we did was we actually glued and screwed it. And I'm going to put another screw. I'm just going to show you very quickly. When you're screwing something like that, don't be tempted to just put the screw in. Ronnie wants to hold us up here, right? What you do is get a small bit smaller than the screw you're using. Okay. Okay. And then what you do then is, where is my little? Excuse me now for a second. My little. Sorry, beg your pardon for a second. My camera. We don't have. Okay. Then you would push.
While you're doing that, Dave, just a quick time check. We need to give everybody a break pretty soon. So unfortunately, we don't have much time left, just so you know.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So countersink screw. Okay. And then you basically would just When you're screwing, use a screwdriver drill and your screws. Always use the slower. There's 2 speeds on a screwdriver drill. That's basically it. Always use the slower version. All right. So that's that drawer. So then we had the top drawer. Okay. And the Granny wants to come around here. The runner was missing. The runner was missing off the top drawer. So basically what we did there was we took off the runner. We marked where it was going in here. And sorry, Grant. Now I'm not going to glue this one because I'm going to take it off again, but that should be glued. It's good. Here's one. Get this in here now. 2. Okay, all fixed. Runner, everything works. And the last thing then that we did was we had a, remember I told you before the handles were all coming away from it. What we did, we got dowels and I drilled this in for a dowel and I put it in here and glued it. Here's one that we glued, okay? And basically what you do here is just hold it firm to the side of any surface, like your little workbench that you have. Very quickly, tenon saw. Proper way to hold a tenon saw is finger out, not like this. You're not choking a chicken. Finger out like this, okay? That'll guide the saw for you. So basically, just cut that. Okay, that's nice and flush there now. All right. And then what you want to do is just put a little hole in, and take the screw. Give you a starter hole here again, smaller bit. Okay. Always drill on a high speed in the middle of that here. Take it back. Okay, put your place that in there. Let's get this drawer out here now to show you. Sorry guys, then we're rushing now. Yeah. So there's your new handle with your dowel in it. And then basically all you do then is just screw that up, okay? Screw that up and you have a nice handle on that. One thing to remember, just now, this is a little bit technical. When you're putting handles in, the grain always goes to the heavens. Everything goes to the heavens, always up, not sideways, always up, okay? The crown of the grain always goes up. There you have it. Your 2 drawers, well, you've 2 made, and we were still working on the other one. And that's basically it. And then that's the Zinsser bins, and I'll get 2 coats of satinwood paint, or maybe in what we do here in the Rediscovery Centre, we would put emulsions on it after the Zinsser bin primer, undercoat and stain blocker. Then 2 coats of emulsion, and then we put polyvine. Polyvine is a water-based acrylic varnish, and what that does, it doesn't distort the colour that's underneath it. If you put like normal varnish over paint, it will go a yellow. You have a yellow hue off it. The trick is use polyvine, Polyvine, water-based acrylic varnish. You can get in matte, satin, and gloss finish. It's very easy to put on, and dries out very well. And a litre of it goes an awful long way, and you have a lovely finish. In fact, that unit over here, just very quickly show you this unit here. This unit here was done in that very method with polyvine, with satinwood paints. These are emulsion paints now, not satinwood, so we just emulsion paints, and finished off in a polyvine finish, which gives it that lovely, and that makes it waterproof and washable. Okay, is that okay?
Dave, that is absolutely super. Thanks very much. There's a lot of thank yous coming in the chat. So thanks everybody for your participation. Just to go back, there was a great question earlier from Willow Park about when buying upcycled furniture, what are the dangerous signs to look out for? We don't have time to cover that right now, but maybe we can cover that later on at the panel discussion at 1 o'clock. Also, just to note, Robert calls you no nonsense Dave, and I tell you what, Robert, you should try working with Dave every day. There's definitely some nonsense there sometimes, but in general, Dave, thanks very much. That was fantastic. Very tough for you to cram it all into one quick session, but there's going to be lots more coming. Stay tuned on the Rediscovery Centre website. We'll have lots more of these virtual sessions, in-person sessions. We even do all-day workshops on furniture restoration, all that kind of thing as well. So Lots of questions still coming in. We'll handle them later. What we're going to do is give everybody a quick 10-minute break now. Our next session is we're going to hand over to a really cool video put together by Repair Café Belfast around vacuum cleaner repair. So 20-minute break, and we'll see you all back here at 11:30. Thanks so much, Dave, for your time there.
Thanks a million, guys. Thanks for watching.
Okay, hi folks, welcome back. So moving swiftly along to our next session, after the energetic Dave showed us lots of furniture tips, we are delighted next to screen a video that was especially made for today by Repair Café Belfast. When we decided that we were going to host a Fix It festival, giving tips and essentially create a repair cafe of types online, they were the first people we turned to because the work that they do is fantastic. They've got such a great collection of experts on their panel, and they have regular sessions, and it's truly inspirational, the great work that they do. And they were generous enough to pre-record a video, especially for us today. The expert in question, his name is Stephen Craig, and he spent 11 years as a broadcast exec for the BBC in Northern Ireland. His family were electricians growing up, and he started off mending Christmas lights when he was in primary school for extra pocket money. That was his original nixer. And now these days he advises on electrical equipment, which of course is it can be very dangerous, but Stephen's very knowledgeable, and safety is always the number one priority. So look, I'm going to hand over to Stephen. This was pre-recorded, and when we decided what we were going to, obviously we could talk about any kind of household item, and we thought, well, one thing that most people have is a vacuum cleaner, and it's also something that can give a lot of trouble. So I hope you enjoy this video now that we're about to show, and I'll hand over to Stephen. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Stephen. I'm from the Belfast Repair Café, and I'm here to talk to you today about the maintenance and repair of vacuum cleaners. I've got 3 examples of vacuum cleaners here. One is a sort of cylindrical type semi-industrial cleaner, a bit like a Henry, but without a bag in it. We have a Dyson battery powered rechargeable device, and we also have a Miele domestic cleaner. And so we'll go through those and highlight some of the points on them. Okay, let's talk about the electrical side of the connections to the cleaner. We'll focus first of all on this cylindrical type cleaner here, which is mains powered, and highlight some of the issues that could arise with it, and some of them are actually similar with the Miele machine. Before I start into that, however, there's something I do want to say, and that is that mains electricity can be very, very dangerous. All I can ask is, if you've got any doubts about even checking fuses and whatnot, don't get someone who actually knows what they're doing to have a look at this for you. This is not about getting stuck into absolutely everything. It's about being pragmatic about it, and there's areas that if you're not experienced and you don't have the right training, you really don't want to go near. Sort of things that we do find on cleaners, if you take this one for instance, is it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Person comes in and says it's dead, doesn't work. Because they get trailed about the floor an awful lot, the areas that give the most trouble actually in terms of the cable is going to be around the plug top. If you imagine this is plugged in and the cable's getting bent back and forward all the time, eventually it is a flexible cable, but it can only flex so much, and eventually the strand breaks. Now, when it breaks, it can break in one of 2 ways. It can just fail and the cleaner just doesn't work. Or sometimes if it breaks in such a way that the cable shorts out inside, I've heard people saying, oh, there was a sort of a flash and a bang and it all stopped, and then you discover there's a small hole in the cable, where usually close to the plug or close to the actual where it comes into the machine itself here, because that's the other area where it gets twisted. You can see they've got strain relief in this, but even so, you know, with the cable moving back and forward as you pull the cable, the cleaner around, sorry, the cable can get damaged. If it actually shorts out, it'll probably blow the fuse in the plug. If it goes off with a bang and there's a flash out of the cable at either end, it's fairly certain the fuse will be blown, and to be honest with you, there's no point putting a fuse in it until such times as you've actually got it repaired. If you're comfortable with remaking the connections into the plug top, you can redo that. If you're not, don't bother. The other thing I would stress at this point is that if it does blow the fuse, this cleaner here has a 5 amp fuse in it, and that's what's fitted to it. Never ever consider putting a heavier fuse in it just because you haven't got a 5 amp one. And please don't consider things like silver paper or anything like that. The fuses are there to protect you. The 13 amp socket is capable of delivering quite a lot of power, and it has to be fused down to protect not only the cable but also the motor within and all the electrical systems within the actual cleaner itself. So fuse has to be, if it is replaced, fit the right one to it, please. Now, there are other reasons why a fuse might just go on its own. One of them can be heat. If I take the plug back off again, if the terminals have come loose inside, what can happen is you can get heat in here, particularly on the live, and that runs up into the fuse itself and heats it up, and that can cause premature failure of the fuse. Also, the pins in the socket, if the socket's faulty and you're using the cleaner for a long period of time, you can actually get heating effects in there. That will cause the actual, well, it might not cause initially, but it certainly will reduce the lifespan of the fuse and cause it to fail prematurely. So if you do open up and you find there's tarnishing on the pin or on the wire, looks as though it's been heated up, you need to actually repair that first before you even consider putting the fuse in. The other areas of electrical within the actual cleaner itself, we've mentioned the cable in through. There's a switch in this one, so it switches on and off. They can fail as well. This is a fairly standard rocker switch, which is used in many bits of equipment, and by taking the 2 screws off here after you've unplugged it and not before, so you never ever work on a cleaner with it plugged in, you can actually take that cover off and check the switch if it's faulty, and replacements for these sort of standard rocker switches are fairly straightforward. Other than that, you're really into a problem with the motor itself internally within the cleaner, and that's really a stripped down job, and if you're not comfortable with taking it apart to do that, leave it. Get someone who's more experienced to do that. Okay, I was pointing out that the Melee has got a drum built into it that actually allows you to roll the cable up inside. These are not impervious to faults either. Again, the same problem we have with the other cleaner. The cable, this is a molded plug this time, but the cable has got a small amount of strain relief here, but if it's going to break, it'll be around here, is where it'll break. It is possible that it's broken internally, because at the end of the day it's wrapped around the drum, and if you pull the whole thing out, you're effectively straightening and bending the cable again on the actual drum inside. To access that requires you to dismantle the whole cleaner. This whole bit here has to come off, and then you can access the drum if you believe the cable's broken. The easiest way to check the cable is with some sort of continuity tester. If you've got a simple little meter or a continuity buzzer or something like that, you can check the live to live, neutral to neutral, and if it's fitted with an earth, and every cleaner has an earth wire on it. The cylindrical one does because it's all metal, but this one here does not. It's what they call a class 2 piece of equipment. So we can open this up and take the drum out, check buzz the cable out from each pin back to the end of the drum, and check that the cable's not broken. Other things that can cause problems in these, this one here has an electronic speed controller on it, which takes it up from a very low power setting right up to almost over 2 kilowatts of suction. They have been known to fail, but it's quite rare. And the other thing, of course, is the on-off switch again, which is, unfortunately, this one is like a foot switch, so it's going to get a kicking every time that somebody uses it, and there's always a risk that it could get damaged. Okay, what we have now is, and I've taken the container and the nozzle off the Dyson because it just makes it easier to handle. This is a battery powered one, and the battery pack is held in the bottom here, and it's retained by a fastening, and at the side, once you remove the dust chamber, you can gain access there to take the battery off. A note of caution about these, they are battery powered. It only runs off 21 volts, but it's a lithium battery, and lithium batteries they're very, very good. I mean, this is quite light. There's an awful lot of power in this. This thing will run for, I don't know, half an hour, whatever. But the problem with them is that they can be quite dangerous if you mishandle them. So you don't really want to try and open these, because if you do and you accidentally stab the battery, if you stick a screwdriver into the actual battery cell itself, the thing could go on fire. It really isn't a good idea. And to be honest with you, if you find that your cleaner is, you've been using it for a few years and you find that you have to keep charging it because you only get a few minutes use out of it, rechargeable batteries have only a lifetime of so many cycles. Once you've gone beyond that, their capacity drops off quite quickly. There's nothing really you can do with it. I mean, people say you can reform cells and do things like that, but in truth, you replace the battery. And what you need to do then is to go on to the Dyson website and put in the model number and get a replacement battery from the manufacturer, or I'm quite sure there's other people doing battery packs for these as well now. They're quite easy to change. As I say, it's just a fastening here and the thing comes off, and that'll restore the life of the thing back in again. But they're not user serviceable. But it is a case if you find that you've charged it overnight and you only you're getting less and less time out of it before it starts shutting down, then it's probably time to put a new battery in it. The charger is this unit here, big plug top, generates the 21 odd volts that it needs to charge this thing. These actually have a welded plastic case around the edge. Now I have seen people who have opened these and attempted repair on them, and sometimes you can repair them inside, sometimes you can't. I never open them and I never repair them, and quite simply it's a safety issue. If you open that to repair it, and let's say you do get it fixed, how do you guarantee that the integrity of the seal is complete the whole way around? Someone plugs this in and then you go to unplug it and you pull it out, but the cover comes off it because it's not sealed now. What you've done is you've just exposed live mains inside there, and it's bad enough if some of us as adults do it because we can switch the socket off and work the thing out, but could you imagine that being plugged in and the child poking at it and the cover comes off it? It just doesn't bear thinking about. So as a matter of principle, even for myself, I never repair these things if they go faulty. I mean, the cable can break here or here if it's being maneuvered, you know, if you're a bit rough with it, but please don't, you know, just get a replacement for it. It's not worth it. If you want to check it, you can check it with a meter. They always have on a label in the bottom of them stated the output voltage and current, so you can actually get a little test meter and put it between the outer screen here and the center pin and measure the voltage, and if you're getting nothing out of it, it's knackered. You need to find a replacement. And but if it's working and your cleaner is not accepting a charge, you're probably looking at a faulty battery. We've got our cylindrical cleaner here. I said I would touch on some of the issues we found internally with them. This machine has a inlet which is mounted here. It's where the flexible hose goes on, and the hot air comes out here. It's worth knowing on a cleaner, particularly when it's working really well, what the air, just get a feel for what the airflow's like, particularly if you don't have a hose on it. It can be very useful to identify when you've got problems, if it's not sucking very well, that you sort of realise there's hardly any air coming out. Also, it'll get hotter as the flow goes down, because the airflow through the cleaner is what actually cools the motor. The motor's inside here, and there's no other way of cooling it other than the airflow through. And that's true of all the cleaners actually we have here. So this one here, as I say, it's bagless. So if we lift it out, the first thing we notice is we've got this dome-shaped cover, and in behind there is the actual fan and the motor for sucking the air up through the hose through the filter and in here and out. So the filter in this, as I said earlier, it's a bagless type. The filter in this is this piece of cloth here, and you can see that I haven't bothered emptying it, and that was deliberate because I wanted to show you what was in it. If you look here, you'll see as I brush the fine dust off it, it goes down inside, filter down, and occasionally washing it, just washing it so that it keeps it clear. The issue you'll find with all the cleaners will be that this is really a filter, and if it gets blocked, then the airflow through it will be very, very poor. So this just needs a brush down now, but every so often I'll take this and wash it. And this plastic ring in the bottom here actually hits the dome here and separates the two to allow the air to flow through. It doesn't suck this up and around and block the whole thing. And then there's a rubber seal around the edge to retain it. So that's how we deal with the cylindrical one. So what we have here is the Miele. This is the more common type of domestic cleaner. In here we've got a compartment with the accessories, the little brushes and cleaner and whatnot are kept inside the actual cleaner itself. It's very, very, very well thought out. And you have speed control on it, so you can set it to either, if you're depending on the type of surface you're dealing with, or whatever's going on in it. I have to say, in our case, it tends to be flat out all the time. The retractable cable drum and the on-off switch. So to open it up, we just lift it up like this here. Those of you who have a cleaner like this will understand this very well. The bag is a filter, and the bags are disposable. This one has no use so far. One thing to bear in mind with the bags is that because they are a very, very fine porous material, if you try to use a bag, empty the bag and then reuse it, there's a danger that the pores will get blocked, and that what will happen is you'll end up causing the motor to overheat. So manufacturer would recommend that you always replace the bag every time. I must confess there's been the odd occasion when I've had to empty a bag because I've suddenly realised I've run out. I'm sure we've all done it, but it's best avoided. In behind here is another filter. It's this little one here, and really that's just a second level filter. Now that doesn't have to get replaced every time. We tend to work on we'd buy a set of bags without a filter, and then maybe a set with. You can, some of them, depending on the cleaner, you can buy them with or without these separate filters, and we would replace that every so often, probably every other set of bags. Even, what is it, half a dozen bags or something like that, so we'd replace that every other time. That second filter is really there to protect the motor if this thing gets punctured. If something gets down in here that's sharp and puts a hole in it, this bag here, it stops a lot of the dust and dirt getting into the motor, and as you see, it's easily replaced. The last filter is this one here, and this is an activated charcoal filter, and they actually, there should be a date in that, but really they're there to sort of remove any odours. If you did suck pieces of food into the cleaner and they sat for a few days and they start to smell a bit, this filter here helps to actually alleviate the odours in the house. So it just clips on underneath the top. I think Miele recommend something like once a year or something like that to replace those. I can't remember exactly when, but again, in all these things, you know, your final port of call always has to be the manufacturer's handbook in terms of maintaining the machine. Okay, now we have the Dyson. I've taken the tubes off it. It's just easier to handle than in front of the camera here. Basically, this has got its little vortex generators here, which spin the air around to cause the debris that picks up through the main entrance here to land into this chamber. There is a red lever which, when you drop it down, opens the bottom and allows you to empty the dust and dirt out. Now, most of the times that's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else with these. But occasionally it is worth doing two other things on them. One is, if you pull this right up, then you can actually take this off, and as luck would have it, yep, there we go. It can be fiddly. And what we'll notice in here is that on the centre bit there's a fine gauze, and that can become blocked. So it's worth occasionally just going through and making sure, even just wiping it with a damp cloth to make sure that's clear and doesn't get blocked up, because if that gets blocked then the efficiency of the cleaner will drop away off. The other thing that can be cleaned in this one without dismantling any further is the main filter here in the middle. Now this filter, interesting enough, you can replace it, but you can also, I believe, wash this one, which we have done a few times, and replaced it as well. Basically what happens within this cleaner is that the dust and dirt's pulled in around the outside of the gauze. It's pulled up through these little chambers into the filter at the top and out through the motor and out at the back, and this here is actually provides the main filter going into the motor. You can actually use it when it's like this and get an idea for whether it's running properly or not, but it is fairly straightforward. There's a similar, Vax make a similar sort of cleaner, and theirs is slightly different in that you can actually dismantle this part here and wash it all out. Again, I don't recommend putting it back together again until you've thoroughly dried it, even though it is a battery unit, but it doesn't do any good to suck water through the motor. But the gauze here is the most important thing. It doesn't have to be done every time, but sometimes you just need to go in there and just give it a wipe down, make sure all the holes are clear. And the only other thing left to worry about here in this is actually the entrance to the chamber comes in, and it has to go at an angle to encourage the dust to spin round and drop down, and there's a cheek in the corner there, and just make sure that there's no blockage in that. When we come to do the accessories next, we'll actually look at some of the things that can get caught and block the thing up. But this one here particularly has this little, as it's going in, it has to get deflected over, and there's a little deflection piece in here for doing that, and as long as that's clear, we're happy. We're at the final part of the discussion of cleaners and their problems, and the first part we're going to look at is probably the second most troublesome part of the accessories, and that would be the rotary brush. This one here I've deliberately left with bits of cord and hair and whatnot in it, particularly if you have someone in the house with long hair or animals or whatever. It can cause problems with a rotary brush. I noticed there's an advert in the telly at the minute that somebody has come up with a design that removes this. I'm not clear how well it works, but there you go. Most of these things, in fact all of them I've come across, you can open them and take them apart. This melee, the actual drive for this is done with the actual airflow going up the pipe, runs a small turbine, which is what drives this. And to get into it, there's a couple of screws which you just undo here, and we take the cover off, and once we get inside we can see we've actually better access to this. In fact, we can, if I can get this to work, I can get this out. Well, certainly if nothing else I can even get at it and get all the bits and pieces off it. I find the best way to get rid of hairs and things like that is to use a pair of scissors and just cut your way down and lift them out. Now, the bit that tends to get forgotten about is the end pieces. That's where the bearings are. I know on a Vax that I did work on, basically the rotary brush had jammed. The bristles were clear, but what had happened was that a lot of hair got caught in around the ends here and caused it to jam. Now the Vax don't use the airflow to drive it, they actually use a separate motor in here. And actually what happened in that particular, when the motor got burned out, which was rather unfortunate because the cleaner was about £100 worth and the motor was £80 worth. So the owner decided that it was actually more cost effective just to renew the cleaner rather than spend £80 on repairing an old cleaner. The actual turbine that drives it, you can probably see inside there. there's a little vein. If you get debris stuck in there, that's not going to rotate. And what you might have to do is just work that back and forth with hand until whatever's in there, like a coin or something, falls out, to release it. Because if that gets stuck, this will not spin. Now others use a separate motor for it, but the Melee is a little turbine here, and others may well be the same. So the only other thing that gives trouble on is because you've got a sharp elbow at the corner, the first place that any debris is going to get caught is here. So you find if it's not lifting properly, first thing to do is take it off the tube, you know, the tube that it goes onto, take it off the tube and just simply eyeball it. If you've got a torch, shine the torch up in, illuminate it inside and make sure you can see clearly there's nothing stuck in there. So that's the first thing you need to do there. The actual tube and handle, and this is the Melee one, it's adjustable for comfort. You can actually take this off, so it's dead easy to check. Yes, it's clear. The corner, the elbow is harder, but you can actually get an idea by if the cleaner's running, put that onto the pipe, and if you feel it being sucked on really, really hard, there's possibly a blockage in there. One thing I would say at this point is never put anything sharp down these. If you're going to put something down in to try and clear it, something soft and without a sharp edge on it. But generally these here don't. This bit here, because it's smooth, doesn't give any trouble. The bits that give trouble are the next bit. Are these. Their best friend are cocktail sticks, because inside that it's ribbed just like the outside to give it the flexibility. One of the downsides of that is, of course, these can split and let the air in, which reduces the efficiency of the cleaner. But actually, to get it blocked, it's some form of debris gets trapped in there. One example that I had actually in a repair cafe was a cocktail stick got jammed inside, and I've seen this quite a few times actually, but this particular one was interesting because the cocktail stick got jammed across the ribs. The owner had, I think a member of their family had knocked over a tray with a lot of sweetie wrappers on it. They obviously were having a nice night watching a good film or something, and they decided to just suck it up in the cleaner, which normally would have been no problem, but the cocktail stick caught the plastic wrappers on the way up, and eventually it just blocked the whole thing solid. And the only way we were able to get it clear, first of all, to prove it, we literally had to hold it out straight and shine a torch down one end, and we saw that it was blocked. The other way of doing it is just fire the cleaner up, and if you find the airflow coming out is very high and you put this back on, that drops away to virtually nothing, you know you've got a blocked pipe. Also, when you put it on, the pipe will sort of jump with the air pressure on it. But it can be quite difficult to clear out, and I think in this particular case we found a big long brush shaft and got it up in and we managed to release the chopstick, and once we did that, when we put it back on the cleaner, it just sucked everything right through. It was clear. Not a chopstick, it's a cocktail stick, sorry. So that's the big problem with these. Lollipop sticks, cocktail sticks, anything like that can get jammed in there can then cause, in itself won't block it, but it can actually cause other material to build up and block it. Another way of checking this, actually, if you live in a two-storey house, is just literally hang it over the stairs and get someone down below to shine a torch up and have a look up through it. I'm sure somebody else has got another clever way of doing it. Some of the older ones you could squeeze right up into a shorter pipe, which you could see through, but this one doesn't do that. Fortunately, this one's never blocked on us, but they can do. This is the actual rotary brush off the portable Dyson. It actually uses a small motor at the bottom, and on the tube between the two there's a couple of connections there that carry the power down to it. Fortunately, the tube in this is completely straight, so you can look down it and see that it's clear. The rotary brush, like the others, you do have a fastener that you can take off and open this up, and then you've got a locking collar at this end, and again you can take the brush out and not only clean the long hairs off it, in this case, but make sure that the bearings at the end are completely clear and it's free running, because the ones with the electric motor in them, unless they've got some form of protection on them, they will actually overheat and eventually fail. So that's our quick run through on cleaners. You know, as I always say, first thing, get the instructions from the manufacturer. It'll give you so many good guidelines in terms of, you know, if your filter can be washed or not. I know on the Vacs they have two filters. They have a pre-motor and a post-motor filter on them, I think it is, or is it a pre-chamber and post-motor, something like that. One of them can be washed, one can't. Upright Electrolux ones, it's just a bag, like the Miele. You just replace the bag. But again, think safety first. Do not work on it when it's plugged in. Even if it's not an electrical problem, even if you're just checking anything else out on it, make sure it's not plugged in. You really don't want things taken off with your hands in around them. And the other thing is, you know, read the instructions on it. And if you don't know, if you're not comfortable, don't. Thank you very much.
Wow, fountain of knowledge. Well done, Stephen. Thank you so much to Repair Café Belfast for submitting that, putting that together for us, especially for today. Really, really helpful, and part of some of the amazing work that they do. We do have a representative from Repair Café Belfast who'll be joining us for our panel discussion at 1 o'clock and our Q&A. So any questions? I know earlier there was people talking about wanting to set up repair cafes. People already have taken steps to doing their own all around the country. If there's anything you've ever wanted to know, 1 o'clock is going to be the time to ask those questions. So quick break now, comfort break, lunch break, whatever you can squeeze into 18 minutes. We're going to come back again at 12:15. We're going to talk about some bicycle quick fixes and repairs that you can do to your bicycle with Mark from Rediscovery Centre. So thank you very much for all your attendance and your patience and your and for tuning in so far, guys. I hope you're enjoying it. The day so far. We're enjoying hosting it. Hope to see you back soon. Hi everybody, welcome back and welcome to Mark. Mark Dunn is our Rediscover Cycling Program Manager here at the Rediscovery Centre in Ballymun, and he is joining us today remotely from his garage, and you can see him on the screen there, and what I'll do is I'll make his screen larger when I find him. So the next part of the session, and once again welcome back, and once again many thanks to the EPA for being our partner on these series of events focused on repair throughout June. And we're going to talk about bicycles. So Mark, look, at kick off there, and why don't you tell us a little bit about what the most common parts of a bike that need repair are and how to get around it. And guys, please submit your questions to Mark. He will be around later on for the panel discussion, but if there's any questions about what he's talking about now, feel free to unmute yourself, feel free to put it in the chat, and I can chime in and I can relay them to Mark. Mark, look, I'll hand over to you. Let's talk about bikes.
Cheers, Ed. Thanks a million. Hi everyone, I'm Mark. I'm as I said, the program manager for Rediscover Cycling. So we're going to talk about mostly tires and brakes today. It's really, really common. This stuff wears down quite regularly. And they're going to need constant adjustment. Gears do need a bit of adjustment as well, but it's a bit more complex that we can go into today. So we're going to talk about maintaining your tires and your tube, as well as how to take a tire off, put one back on, and then a quick demonstration of checking over your brakes and small adjustments you can do there. Of course, drop in any questions you have as we go along. So looking at tires first, the best way to fix a puncture is to not get one in the first place, to try and prevent any issues ahead of time. And the main thing you can do there is to keep your tires pumped up. So be reading off the side of your tire what the recommended pressure is. So here we have it written in two different ways. Most people work with PSI. So this tire is telling us between 50 and 75 PSI. So it's okay to work at the minimum or the maximum, but about halfway in between the two is what you're looking for. So this tire, you do about 60, 65. So to gauge that, you would want to have a pump with a pressure gauge on it, and the needle will tell you when you're at the correct pressure. You can use foot pumps that are used for cars, but depending on whether you have the thick valve or the thin valve, you may not have the correct fitting. But if it's a bike pump, you'll have fittings for both. If you're just using a hand pump or anything that doesn't have a pressure gauge on it, the tire should feel rock solid. There's no give whatsoever when you push on it, because your whole body weight is going to be on there, and it only wants to like depress a little bit. You shouldn't really have any kind of give to it. It should be rock solid, no matter if it's a thin tire or a thick tire, unless you're doing some off-road stuff. But for most of us, when we're on road, you want it really, really hard. Just like a balloon, like a party balloon, it's going to be constantly deflating over time. So you're going to pump it up, and about 2 weeks later, it's gone soft. It'll be slowing you down, and it's more likely to get a puncture. So you may need to pump it up every 2 to 3 weeks. Keep on top of it before you actually notice it slowing you down a huge amount. It's going to make life a lot easier and prevent punctures. If you need to replace the tire or the tube, you'll have the size written on the side of the tire. There's loads of different ways of writing it. The main thing you need to know is the larger number of the two tells you what wheel size, and the smaller number tells you the width of the tire itself. So this is in millimeters here, 622 millimeters for the wheel size and 40 millimeters for the tire width. It can be in inches as well. It might be like 26 inches for the wheel size and like 1.5 inches for the tire width. So that'll tell you what size tire you need and also what size tube you need if you need to replace it. But if you need to replace it, you'll obviously need to take all of it off. So I'm going to take the wheel off this bike and take the tire off. So I have it flipped upside down already in my stand, how I would normally do it on the ground and how you can do it at home. You don't need to have a fancy stand. You can just flip it upside down on the ground. So if you have rim brakes, you'll need to open them up. And if you have whatever your wheel fastener is, you'll need to open. So I've got a nutted wheel here. I'll need to use my spanner. It's a 15 millimeter spanner. I can use an adjustable spanner, but I just need to make sure I get the fit really, really tight to loosen it up. Once it's finger loose, that's loose enough. I don't need to remove the nut. If it's a quick release, it should pull open by hand. If you need extra leverage, you can slip a spanner over it to get extra leverage. Or you might use an Allen key, all sorts of different ways. If you have fancy things going on with the hub, like an electric motor or brakes or internal gears or carriers and stuff, there may be other things you need to remove in order to get at the wheel. And sometimes if it's to do with the hub, they're not always easy to disconnect. So it's not always the case with everyone. But because we're working with the back wheel here, we need to get the derailleur that moves our chain around out of the way. We're going to pull it backwards so it's not blocking the gears, and just pull the wheel up and out. We've got our wheel out. So depending on which valve you have, if it's the wider Schrader valve, there'll be a pin in the middle you want to push on to let the air out. If it's the thinner Presta valve, you'll need to screw this guy up to the top and then press on it. It'll let the air out. This will allow you to pump it up, and when you're finished, you tighten it back down again. It can't be removed. You can screw it right the way up. It's not going to fall off or anything. But once we're ready, I've got all the air out of my tire already. That's as much air out of it as you can. It'll make it nice and loose. And we're going to use our tire levers to take the tire off. I'm using metal ones just because they're very long lasting. Plastic ones are fine, but if the tire is very, very tight, the plastic ones may make it too difficult, or they may not be strong enough. The metal ones just need to be more careful of. So the first one I'm putting in, getting it underneath the edge of the tire. I'm going to hook it onto a spoke so it stays in place. And I really want to wedge it in there, make sure it's not going to slip out. Then where the tire is about to come out of the edge of the rim, it's out fully here and it's fully seated in here. It's about halfway in between where it just needs a bit of hand getting over the edge. I put the tire lever in, pull that bit out, same lever out again, move along slightly. And I just keep pulling it out bit by bit, working my way around until I've got about a quarter of it done. And once I've got a quarter of it done, it gets really loose. It no longer wants to keep slipping back in, and I can just drag the lever around and slide the whole edge out the whole way around. Whenever you're taking tires off or putting them on, it's always one edge at a time. If you try and do them both at the same time, it's much too tight. You have to do one edge and then the second, and same for when you're putting it back on. So I've got one edge off the whole way around. I'm going to reach inside, gather up my tube and pull out the tube, all except for the valve. And just pop up the valve last. So I've got my tube out and I'll leave the tire on there just for simplicity's sake. You don't have too many parts floating around. I can put a bit of air into the tube. So this is my Schrader valve, just a pin on the inside. I don't need to unlock anything. Push it into the pump, pull the lever out, pump it up a bit. And I can check on it. If it was punctured, I do have the option to patch it. Use your sandpaper, your rubber solvent, leave it 2 or 3 minutes to melt the rubber. Put your patch on, leave the plastic on the patch. You don't want to try and peel the plastic off afterwards. It's meant to stay on and it'll eventually fall off itself. But patching, you want to leave it a couple of hours if possible to really set up. You don't want to use it straight away, so it's good to have a spare tube, and you never know what kind of puncture you might get. It might be completely worn out from being at low pressure and rubbing against the tire constantly, so you may have to replace the tube completely. If you're having trouble finding it, you can submerge it in some water and see the bubbles coming out, or even just use a bit of soapy water in a sprayer and it'll make bubbles wherever the puncture is. If it's on the outside, it's something in the tire you'll need to pull out. If it's on the inside, it's to do with the rim or the rim tape not being quite set up right. But something on the side is usually low pressure, either wearing it out or getting pinched from hitting a pothole when it's at low pressure. We want to have a look at our tire. The second side should come off easily. You can just lift it up and across, it should peel off. You can run your fingers along the inside, feel for anything poking through. It's usually not too sharp. Have a look at the surface of it, see if there's anything stuck in there. Look from the inside, see if there's any holes that have made the way the whole way through. Obviously, if it's worn down to the threads are showing through, the tire needs to be replaced. And if there's any holes that you can see your thumb through, the tube is going to want to burst through there as well. Any large cuts that are in the tire that, again, your thumb is going to show through, the tube is going to burst through there as well. Your back tire will wear out before your front. So it's always best to have your best tire on the front. So if your back tire wears out, you can put the front tire on the back, put a new one on the front, and just keep rotating them backwards that way. But you want to really inspect the tire, make sure it's in really good condition, or replace it if you're going to be replacing it before you go to fit it back together. So to fit it back together, I've got a little bit of air in the tube. I'm going to pop the tube into the tire. Just get it seated in there the whole way around. There is two kind of main ways of refitting, and this is the way I prefer to do it. Fitting the tube into the tire and then fitting the two at the same time. You may want to check on the tire if there's an arrow telling you the rotation direction. If there is, one side will be pointing clockwise, the other side may be pointing anti-clockwise, or there might be no arrow at all. The clockwise arrow goes on the same side as the gears because the gears want to rotate clockwise as you're cycling. If you get it wrong, I really don't think you'd actually notice a difference. It's very, very minor. The rubber gives you the grip. The tread pattern is more for loose ground. So if it's backwards, it's not going to make a massive difference. You can always fix it later on. So fitting it back on, I'm going to put the valve into the valve hole in the rim. It's a bit of a squeeze. The rim tape's getting in the way. Get the valve into the valve hole. And when I do that, one edge of the tire is sitting on the rim, the other one is completely off. And again, you always want to do one edge at a time. So I'm going to do this inside edge first. And if you can do it entirely by hand, refitting the tire, there's no fear of you damaging anything. Using tire levers, you need to be careful because you might damage the tube. But if you do it entirely by hand, so I'm running my thumb along the inside, pushing the edge of the tire over the rim. So my thumb's on the inside here. I'm just slipping the edge of the tire over. Your thumbs are much better in this circumstance than your fingers. Just the leverage doesn't work out. And that first edge should go on nice and easy the whole way around. So I've got that edge sitting in the rim. the whole way around. The other side is still off. And this can be the tricky bit then. Let's get the tube all set up. Starting the other side, you want to push with both thumbs and start to spread them apart. Because if I just push, it just keeps wanting to fall back out. There's nothing holding it there. So you need to push and then be pushing over a large area. And then it should slip down behind the rim and it's going to stay in there. And I can just keep working my way around. Again, if you use your hands entirely, there's no fear of you damaging anything. Oh, rim tape is going all wonky. If you use just your hands, there's no fear of you doing any damage. So if you can, just keep working it little by little, tiny bit at a time and work it over the edge. That's great, but some tires will be more rigid or tighter and they won't go on as easy. So you may need one tire lever for the very end. So where the edge of the tire is about halfway up the rim is the ideal spot. And it's not about forcing it in or being very aggressive. It's just a little bit at a time, just encouraging it over the edge. So just slip it underneath, lift it up, lower it back down. And I'm just coaxing it in bit by bit. Trying not to interfere with the tube at all, not pinch it. And be really careful with it. Don't be like forcing it in, just lifting it up bit by bit. And then the last bit should just pop over the edge. Make sure it's all seated properly, and I can inflate it the full amount once it's on there. So this tire, its pressure recommendation is 40 to 65 PSI, so around 50 thereabouts is what it's looking for. So to put it back on, let me just grab something so I don't dirty my hands too much. I'm gonna pop the chain onto the gears. It was somewhere in the middle. It'll sort itself out once I turn the pedals. So I've got the chain on the gears, top and bottom. I now need to get the wheel into the brakes. So with disc brakes, you'll have a very thin hole to work with, very thin slot. Rim brakes, you're just working up with the tire. But once it's inside there, then I just need to pull it back down into the frame, whole way into the frame. For modern bikes, if it's an older bike or anything that has just one sprocket, like a single speed or an internal gear, you will need to pull the wheel back to get the chain under tension, as well as keeping the wheel straight. So it's a bit of a balancing act, keeping it pulled back and getting it tight. You may need to like tighten one side and then with the other side still free, kind of straighten the wheel out a bit. But once you have that set up, you want to get the wheel fastener tightened. If it's a nutted wheel, you just get it as tight as you possibly can. You can't over tighten these. You don't want the wheel going anywhere. If it was a quick release, what you want, so your quick release lever here, when it's fully open, you want it to be nice and loose. When it's pointing straight out is when you want to start feeling pressure. And then that second half of the swing, you're pushing through that to clamp it shut. If the pressure starts too early, you won't be able to close it the whole way. And if it starts too late, there won't be enough pressure there. So figure out where you want this to finish. Open it back and you can use the nut on the other side to tighten or loosen it until you get pressure. When it's halfway, you clamp through that to clamp it shut, keep it in place. If it's an Allen key one, if you're just using a small set of Allen keys, it should be fine. You, like, just use the power in your wrist. Don't use your whole arm. Just use your wrist and it won't over tighten it. It should be tight enough to keep it in place. Pump it the full amount, pump it every 2 to 3 weeks, and the tire should be good. Keep an eye on it. Make sure the tread isn't getting too worn out. But main thing, pump it every 2 to 3 weeks, keep it in good condition. But if there's no questions relating to tires, I'll fire on with brakes. Spin us around. Just do a bit of rejigging here. Get everything a bit closer. Maybe tighten it up in the back. Going through these kind of brakes that I have here called V brakes, but we'll also cover caliper brakes a little bit and disc brakes, seeing as they are on quite a few bikes as well. So I'm just going to move my camera down a bit closer. We can have a look at that. As I said, these are called V brakes when the brake is in 2 halves on either side of the wheel, as opposed to caliper brakes, which are usually just on racing bikes, where it's in one piece above the wheel, or disc brakes, which would be down towards the center of the wheel, operating on a disc that's attached to the wheel as well. The very first thing to look at is opening and closing them, which I mentioned when taking the wheel out. With V brakes, you just disconnect it at the top here, kind of squeeze it together and get this top bit to unlatch. Just get to drop down and it'll open out. The wheel can come in and out. You can test how well the brake is working and then simply reconnect it. If the brake isn't working, first thing to check is if you park the bike up and someone accidentally pulls on this when they're taking their bike away, it can easily just pop it open. Just check to see, is it still reconnected? And you can just connect it back up and the brake will be working fine. For caliper brakes, there's a little switch off to the side that you flick up. The brake will open out wider and you flick it back down when you're done. Again, for taking the wheel in and out and for checking on the brake. But we're going to run through a quick kind of 4-step system for checking the brake. We're going to check the brake itself, the pads, the cable, and the balance. So first thing, we check the brake. We just check, does it move nice and easily? A little bit of oil on the pivot points can help keep it going. That's all we're looking for. Next, we're going to check the pads. So your brake pad is much like your tire. It has a tread pattern when it starts for kind of gathering up dirt and water and kind of clearing it away off the rim surface. Eventually that wears out and it just wears completely flat. If the brake pad isn't positioned well, it'll wear unevenly. You won't get the full use of the brake pad, but eventually it'll wear out completely. You'll expose the metal plate underneath the pad, and it's steel. Your wheel is aluminium, much softer. It's just going to eat away at it, destroy the rim. The whole wheel will have to be replaced. There is the type that have removable brake pads, and there's no metal inside of here, but they're usually a bit more expensive. They're not nearly as common. For most rim brakes, you're going to have these kind of standard ones where it's all one piece with a metal plate underneath. So you want to check on the brake pads to see if and when they need to be replaced. Easy enough to take off and to put back on. If I need to reposition it, I just use an Allen key in the back of the pad there. So I have one separate here. You can see I've got an Allen key fitting just there in the back with the pad on either side. The way the washers are done on this is very specific. They can only be in kind of more or less one order. So if you're taking it off or putting it back on, you need to make sure they go back in on the correct order. You'll get all new washers and stuff with a new set of brake pads. And if you are looking for new brake pads, you just ask for V brake pads. You don't need to specify the make and model. Same with a caliper brake, but if you have a disc brake, you need to be very specific as to the make and model because they can be very different. So rim brakes is very generic, disc brakes is very specific to different makes and models. But once I've got it loosened in the back, the pad is free to move around. I can use the brake arm to press it against the rim. They should be set up to stay in the right position for their lifetime, but sometimes they migrate a little bit north or south, depending on the weather. I don't know. And once I have the position correct, I want everything at right angles. So it's parallel, it's going straight in. It's not too high or too low to touch the tire or slip underneath. I just have the tire removed so it's easier to see. But I'm just going to, once I've got the position just right, I'm going to tighten it a little bit at the back to hold it in place. Double check. I'm happy with that. It's going to hit the rim in the right spot, and I can just tighten it more in the back while holding it still so it doesn't spin around. Happy with that. So for your caliper brakes, the brake pads are a little bit different, a bit smaller and less kind of washers going on, but still an Allen key at the back. They're not quite as flexible in terms of moving it around, but you can just do the same kind of thing. You squeeze it off to the side here or use the brake lever to squeeze it shut, hold it in place. Disc brakes, quite a bit different. If you look at the very back of them, there's this pin here. It may be a split pin or an Allen key pin that you'll need to remove. And once you have it removed, you can actually push on the back of the pads here and have them slip out the front. And you can have a look at the pads and they'll just go back in the same way. You'll slip them back in and put the pin back through the holes. The pads are very different. They're a kind of a soft metal and a spring. And they'll start quite thin, but once they get under a millimeter thin, then you'll want to replace them. But if you're bringing the bike in for a regular service, they'll be keeping an eye on that anyway for you.
Mark, how long do brakes tend to last? I mean, would you be talking every year or every 2 years or what?
If you're using the bike regularly, yeah, like once a year, you'd probably be replacing the pads, but it depends on how far you're cycling, if you use both brakes or just one. But yeah, you'd expect to change them at least once a year, thereabouts. Disc brake pads can last longer, but they're more expensive, so the cost kind of balances out. But they can be better for wet conditions. But again, it's not necessarily they're definitely better in all cases. So we've checked our brake, our pads. We're just going to have a quick look at the cable. So we're going to reconnect it and see how much the lever is moving. So how far is it coming back? This is set up just right here. It's coming back the right amount and then springing forward. If it wasn't springing forward, I could put a bit of oil where I can see the cable like at the beginning and end of the housing to keep it flowing. But eventually the cable will seize up from rust or corrosion or dirt and will need to be replaced. But if the cable isn't just right, I have what's called the barrel adjuster at the end of the brake lever. And it is a normal bolt, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. But the effect it has on the cable is the opposite. If I turn it to the left, the cable gets tighter. So even though the bolt is loosening, the cable is getting tighter because it's stretching it out. And if I turn it to the right, the cable is getting looser. So here, if I turn this into the right, so like looking my way clockwise, the cable gets looser and this lever comes back further. We're out of our kind of right angles. It's getting closer to the handlebars. It might crush your finger underneath or eventually just touch the handlebars before you actually get enough braking power. I'm not worried about what it looks like down here, just what the lever is doing. So over time, the pads will wear down, the lever will come back closer to the handlebars. So you'll need to turn this to the left, a couple of turns, test it out, and again, get everything at right angles. So a nice kind of square shape here. This is parallel to the handlebars. And it's not too tight. If it's super tight, you're only pulling with the tips of your fingers. You're not getting very much power at all. So you want a bit of movement to it, but only halfway between fully open and closed, parallel with the handlebars, everything at right angles. So you don't even need any tools to do that. Just do the barrel adjuster with your hand. And once you have it set, you're good to go. The same applies for your caliper brake. It'll have a barrel adjuster up here where the cable enters. It does the same thing. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, but the effect it has on the cable is the opposite. And disc brakes, they don't need nearly as much adjustment, but they can have a barrel adjuster just here, again, where the cable enters to operate the little arm that moves one of the pads in. They're a bit more complex and very hard to show. So everything's on a very small scale. But we checked the brake, the pads, the cable. The only thing left to do is the balance. If we look down at the brake to see which side is moving more than the other, they're moving pretty evenly. If they weren't, I have a little screw. So at the base of the brake, there's a little screw off to the side, one on each side, to balance out which one is tight and which one's loose. If one is tight, it'll pull it across to that side, and vice versa. If it's loose, say on this side, it'll get pulled across the other way. So if I loosen this one off, it gets less spring pressure. And now this side's doing all the work. This other one is just staying still because it's getting pulled across the other way. So I could loosen this one, or I can just undo what I did there. Screw this one in, balance it out until they're both moving the same amount. Always use the brake lever to test it out until they're both moving the same amount. They're both bouncing back and they're letting the rim pass through without touching it. They both wear down at the same rate. If it was a caliper brake, I have a little screw up the top, just one, and it'll swing the whole brake side to side to get it balanced out. It just goes out every now and again. I'll obviously make sure your wheel is in all the way and straight. But if it is, and the brakes are a bit out, they can be adjusted a little bit to the side to sort that out. Obviously, there's plenty more things on the bike that can go wrong. Everything wears out eventually. So do be bringing it into a professional mechanic once a year, twice a year, if you can manage it, to get it checked regularly. But the main thing is keep your tires pumped to keep them working well, avoid punctures and avoid it slowing you down too much. Make sure your brakes are always, safe and operating properly. They're not too loose or too tight. And then if you can manage it as well, you can pick up some chain oil, ideally something that drips out of a kind of spout. And if you can manage it as well, getting something biodegradable, so it's not just washing off into the waterways and contaminating it. A bit of oil in the chain regularly enough. Again, depends on the usage and if you're riding in the wet, but aim for once a month. You can do more. You don't want it covered in oil. You can wipe off the excess with a rag. It doesn't need to be covered in oil. It just needs oil inside the small moving parts. The gears themselves don't need oil on them, just the chain itself. Everything else on the bike you want more or less just clean. Clean the bike regularly will help, because the dirt won't like seize up moving parts or promote rust, because the dirt will have like a small amount of moisture and salt in it, and it'll promote rust and corrosion in the case of aluminium. So just wiping the bike down with a rag can help. Soapy water isn't totally necessary, but it's no harm, because most bikes will be finished with a gloss finish, so it'll just wipe off with a bit of elbow grease and a rag. Any other questions? Yeah, biodegradable oil, like there's not a huge amount of them around. We do currently sell one in the shop. It's 99.99999% biodegradable. There's other ones around that are probably more about 60%. But yeah, it's good that like it's not going to be getting into the waterways and contaminating them. They'll biodegrade. They'll be plant-based. There'll be a mixture of vegetable oils. I wouldn't necessarily just go and like pull olive oil or sunflower oil out of your kitchen and pour it on. I think it's a bit too acidic. I think it promotes rust. So do get something specifically for chains, and don't be tempted to use like, it's better than nothing, but household oils like 3-in-1 or water displacers like WD-40, they're not really designed for that application. They'll get washed off very easily. They won't last a huge amount. Our oil is green oil. Can't quite see. I think I'm getting too much glare on it. It's a UK brand that we get in because they're kind of the most biodegradable one that we can see on the market currently. But there is other ones available. Muck Off do a biodegradable oil. And I think Weld Tight, or no, I'm forgetting now. There is another one out there, but I haven't seen it for sale in shops here yet.
Thanks very much, Mark. That brings us to the end of our session. So do you have anything coming up that you want to tell people about if they want to find out more? Is there any upcoming workshops or anything like that?
We do have a build your bike class, but it may be booked out if I'm not mistaken. But we will be putting on kind of more classes, kind of outdoor stuff, and that we can manage. But we're mainly kind of cleaning up as many bikes as we can, selling them in our eco store, getting them sorted out that way. But we will have kind of more, kind of educational stuff coming up in the future. Yep.
And if anybody on the call is thinking about buying a new bike, don't forget to try and look at upcycled bikes first, which we sell. It's always kinder for the environment to keep things in circulation. Great. Okay. Well, Mark, thanks for your time. You're going to be joining us back again in 15 minutes. So if anybody has any particular questions or about bike repair, you can ask Mark. You can ask Audrey. Will be back. Dave will be back. We'll be joined by Chris from Repair Café Belfast, and that'll be a panel discussion around repair. And guys, if you have anything in particular that you have at hand in your house, bring it to the camera. Show us on the camera. That's what we're here for now, is to give you some advice over our computers, and try and help you in any kind of way that we can. So I'm looking forward to chatting with everybody then. So quick break, and see you all back at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Hi folks, and welcome back. It is 1 o'clock. It is the start of the end of our Fix It Festival. So if I could just remind ourselves one more time why we're here today. We're here to celebrate repair. But we're doing that because as a society, we need to shift to a circular economy. And the Rediscovery Centre is the National Centre for the Circular Economy. And for anybody who doesn't know, in simple terms, at the moment, we're in a linear economy. We're taking resources, we're using them, and then we're sending them to landfill at the end of their lives. And what we promote and educate around is how to close that loop. So it's about keeping things in circulation for longer. And of course, a major part of that is repair. So we're here today to try and give tips and to help and to give advice and to answer questions that people might have around repair. This next session we want it to be as interactive as possible, but we've lined up all our experts that you've currently heard from so far. So we're delighted to welcome back Audrey from the Rediscovery Centre, Mark from the Rediscovery Centre, Dave from the Rediscovery Centre, and as well as that, further to the great video that was submitted by Repair Café Belfast, we also have Chris McCarthy, who is the founder and organizer of Repair Café Belfast. She also is a journalist and has been a campaigner for international charity in the past. So big welcome to Chris as well. And then also to chair this discussion and to take your questions, I'm delighted to welcome Claire Downey, who is the executive for Community Resources Network. So at this point, guys, I'm going to just one more time thank the EPA for supporting us to be able to bring you this event today. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. And I'm going to hand you over now to Claire to take over from here. Claire has wide experience and wide knowledge around repair, Community Resources Network Ireland, a major part of what they do being about the knowledge and education around repair as well. So welcome, Claire, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed, and hello, everyone. Really delighted to be here this afternoon with this panel of expert repairers. To find out a bit more about everyday repair and our repair culture and to answer some of your questions. As Ed said, our network, Community Resources Network, was set up to support repair and reuse experts in organisations like the Rediscovery Centre. And our sister network in Northern Ireland works with Repair Café Belfast as well. It's Northern Ireland Resources Network. And what we try and do is identify barriers and help our members and organisations to overcome them. And we're also funded by the EPA under the National Waste Prevention Programme. So some of you may have joined these sessions on Thursday from the Rediscovery Centre, and we had a really interesting discussion on why repair is so important and how it keeps things going for longer. As Ed said, it's really at the heart of the circular economy, how it helps us avoid buying new and therefore avoid greenhouse gas emissions while supporting jobs and really supporting community. And it's one really interesting element of the repair cafes as well. We also heard what's happening or could happen to support repair in terms of targets or tax relief and so on. And I think that's all available now online to watch back. And of course, you've heard now today how to repair through the workshops. So this session, I guess, is really to hear about the kind of practicalities of repair and how we can get more repair going from a repairer perspective. So thanks very much, Audrey, Mark, Dave, and Chris for joining this panel. And really welcome any questions from the audience. And just while you're preparing your questions, I might just get started with a few. And first of all, would like to ask everyone on the panel how you're finding attitudes to repair. Are they changing? Have they changed recently? And if so, if these attitudes are changing, how are you finding them changing? Maybe we might start with Mark.
Thanks, Claire. Attitudes changing recently. Certainly, like this past year, there's been a huge bike boom. So bike shops are like booked out for like possibly weeks in advance. So like people are seeing that when it comes to buying new, like the supply chains can't always keep up with the demand, so people are repairing bikes so they can keep going. And there, like the kind of interest in restoring older bikes kind of like goes up and down over time. The trend kind of comes in and out. But people do always see that there is some kind of inherent value to bikes. They always have, you know, some part of it is always working. So people do want to keep them going if they can. It's just kind of competing with the kind of new bike market and that. But yeah, people do see it as a good investment to start off with a secondhand bike before possibly buying new. And sometimes then they see it works just as fine. So they'll kind of keep it going. So I think it's the interest in cycling is growing, so kind of then the interest in repairing them is kind of growing along with it. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Chris, have you seen the same thing, that the pandemic has kind of changed a little bit attitudes to repair? You're repairing different things to bikes though, but
yeah, we do bike repairs, but also small electricals, items of furniture, sewing, all kinds of things. And I think it started before the pandemic, actually. I mean, we had our project in Belfast has been going just over 3 years. And for those of you who've not been to a Repair Café, it's a kind of pop-up community event where people bring along broken things and they get matched up with a volunteer who has the right skills to help them get that thing working again, hopefully. And certainly we saw a real rise in interest and demand for what we were doing before the pandemic, to the extent that we were going, how do we reconfigure what we're doing to kind of better meet that demand? And we also had an increasing number of inquiries from other communities that wanted to start something similar, had heard what we were doing and wanted to kind of do something like it in their area. So we were seeing like 3 or 4 new repair cafes start in Northern Ireland just in the months immediately before lockdown. And I think then lockdown has continued that, because suddenly, you know, everybody's normal everyday life was shaken up, and people had to find more creative solutions. They couldn't just nip to the shop and buy something. Oh, I'm being joined by a small child, sorry. So we certainly saw people wanting to be more resilient, wanting to learn new skills, and willing to try fixing things themselves, whereas maybe before they wouldn't have bothered. They would have just had the option of just going and buying a new one, and suddenly, you know, during lockdown they had to kind of make do and mend a bit more. So that's really positive. And you know, we're really hoping as we come out of this time, and people think about, you know, the importance of community connection, and they think about climate change, and actually, you know, it's an opportunity to think again and do things differently. So we're hoping that repair will be part of that.
excellent. And Dave, are you finding people are willing to tackle furniture repairs at home, or are you getting lots of interest in the kind of skills training and workshops? Are you how are you finding attitudes to furniture repair or bigger items?
Yes, hi Claire. Yes, certainly in the refurbishment and upcycling, again, what the pandemic did to people was it made them think, and it made them look around their homes, because all the shops were closed. So they decided, rather than just throw it out, let's try and fix it. And that's a massive advantage at the moment. And obviously the trick is, with things opening back up again, is to keep it going and to keep people upcycling and recycling. We have had a huge interest here in the Rediscovery Centre. I got many emails from people asking questions in relation to paint and tips and all that. So yes, to answer your question, very much so. It's a huge, huge market, but it can be tapped into even more. And we would be endeavour here now, our ethos would be that really tap into people upcycling, recycling, and help them with tips on how to do it, and not to throw it out and bring it to the landfill. Upcycle it, paint it up, wherever, repair it, give it a new lease of life, and that's about it, really.
Excellent. And Audrey, I suppose for textiles, you'd imagine, you know, in the past everyone knew how to sew on a button or repair a small tear or something like that. Are you finding kind of people are getting back into that now? Is there more enthusiasm for the home repairs?
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Yes, is the answer to that. I mean, the Rediscovery Centre is a place where everybody would come anyway to talk about repair. That's what we're all about here. But I think because of pandemic particularly, people have been locked down, everything became slower. So they had more time to kind of repair rather than rushing 9 to 5, getting in your car, speeding off. So sewing is such a therapeutic skill to learn that people had more time to actually sew and be creative about how they're sewing. So yeah, I've seen a big interest. We get questions all of the time how to sew things, and we have a sewing machine in our eco store here, and we have a little, as you can see probably behind me, I don't know if you can see it, Claire, worn and loved repair kit station upstairs, so people can take what they want and ask us questions. So yeah, there's been a huge, and I'm delighted because it was handed down to me all over the years, so I'm delighted to hand it on, not just to my own family but to anybody who's interested.
Brilliant. And what are the kinds of repair, Audrey, that you see that are either really common for textiles, or what's maybe a kind of repair that's people might imagine is more complicated than it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose when it comes to denim, a lot of people would find it difficult because it's quite a tough material to deal with. And even if they have a sewing machine, it's still quite difficult to deal with. So I recommend that they use a visible patch like they do in Japan with the Sasiko technique, which is really a technique that has been here all through the centuries, like in the 1940s that I said. It's just basic stitches. And actually I have a picture here of a Sasiko. You can see it there. It's basically just the running stitch that I already mentioned, Claire. Can you see that there?
Mm-hmm.
So all it is the running stitch with a piece of material under the jeans. And so,
sorry,
move it over this way. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see the running stitch that I was telling people about this morning. It's so basic that it works for everything. So jeans and hems, because people start sellotaping up their hems, block your ears to that actually, and don't sellotape up your hems because it's the easiest thing to do, you know, a slip stitch or any of the stitches I gave you today. You can, well, apart we don't want a blanket stitch on your hem, but it could look good. Yeah, so
how do you spell that, the Japanese techniques?
Sashiko.
Sashiko. Okay.
Sashiko. But I mean, it's like this that my mum had done.
Yeah.
It's no really different than that. You know, just there's a hole in behind there, and then you're embroidering over. But you can use the simplest stitch, which is the running stitch.
Fantastic. And tears in jeans, just such a common problem. So great to have an answer for that, and all the fashionable tears that we want to cover over when fashion changes.
Oh yes, exactly.
Good to have an answer for that. Maybe to Chris, what are the really kind of I suppose common repairs that are maybe easier than people expect, or what are the even most common items that come in for repair into the repair cafes?
Well, the most common item is lamps. And we fixed 55 lamps since we started. And not very much can go wrong with a lamp. There's only a certain number of elements, and it's going to be one of those things. So it's a good one from that point of view. One of the reasons we chose vacuum cleaners for the little session that Stephen led on earlier is we see a lot of vacuum cleaners, and actually most of the time it's been caused by not being able to clean it out properly. Sorry, it's just perfect timing.
It's okay.
So it's you know, actually when you learn to maintain your things, you avoid things breaking in the first place, and oftentimes things just need to get clean out. We also often find, this happened just this week, we were talking about a repair doing a little trial repair event, and somebody was going to bring something, and then the mere threat of it coming to a repair cafe has got it working again. So that also happens sometimes. You don't quite know what's at the root of that. But Tina was asking there in the chat just what we've been doing during lockdown, and certainly it's been very, very tricky because, sweetheart, I need to stop. Okay, it's been very. Maybe I'll come back and answer that question.
At this stage, I'll need to go over to Mark maybe, and we'll come back to you. Yeah, Mark, what do you see for bikes that maybe people could more easily master at home, or what's the really common things that kind of go wrong?
Like depending on the time of year, very much so. Like punctures are kind of more common when the ground is wet. So whenever you have wet ground, the rubber cuts more easily and stuff gets washed into the gutter and that. But yeah, like so much of it is caused by kind of not maintaining it a huge amount. So like tires wearing out because they're not pumped regularly. Or like that simple trick of reconnecting the brakes. I don't know how many times I've done that. It takes 2 seconds and then the bike is working just fine. Stuff like that, stuff getting just slightly disconnected. But sometimes it's just about like trying to follow, like say your control up the handlebars, following the cable and just seeing, okay, where does the kind of the information, the energy from the cable actually stop progressing, working through it like that kind of, and taking a, how do you say it?
Like a diagnostic approach?
Yeah, like a trial and error kind of, like isolate parts, test each one and see which one is the one that's not working properly, disconnect things and see what's working properly, what isn't. But it's usually quite, like everything wears out eventually, and it's just keeping an eye on it over time. Like if bikes fall over, if parts get bent out of place, they just need to be put back again. It's usually kind of simple stuff.
I didn't
Yeah,
know
maintaining the tires and brakes is probably the main thing. Kind of gears, they if they get a knock, they'll get out of whack, but and it's a bit more complicated. So getting familiar with how your brakes and the tires and that work will just help so much in keeping an eye on it and maintaining it over time.
That's really interesting. I'm completely guilty of not maintaining my bike, and I have a problem with my brakes right now. So I'll go off and look at that now. And I didn't know actually punctures are more common on wet ground. That must be a real problem for Ireland.
Oh yeah, especially like it's the worst is when you have a really dry week like we've had now, and then we're going to get rain, all the glass and everything gets pushed into the gutter, and you get just a slew of punctures then. So when it's been dry for a while and the debris is all sitting on the road, yeah. But yeah, when it's wet, obviously you need to be more careful yourself, but yeah, more likely to puncture then. Rubber cuts more easily when it's wet for whatever reason.
Just have to bring that kit everywhere with you. Dave, there's actually loads of questions, even from the last sessions as well, coming up around furniture. I suppose, first of all, sort of what are the really common sort of easy fixes you find? And then I have some questions around perhaps just recapping on the painting tips, emulsion instead of wood paint. Can you paint over varnish, or can you only revarnish, and a few other questions as well. So you can take it in whichever order you like.
Okay. Well, the type of furniture that would be upcycled in many homes, first of all, like furniture is endless. Its lifespan is endless, really, because there's so many things you can do with it. So say, for example, you have a chest of drawers. Rather than throw out that chest of drawers, you can take the sides off it, take the drawers out, and then turn the drawers into a shelving unit. Put wallpaper in the back of it, paint it up, like, and make it, give it a new lease of life. So from that point of view, like furniture, really, its lifespan is endless. There's so many things you can do with it. There's so many alternatives you can make with a piece of furniture. Just because it's chest of drawers doesn't mean that's all it is. You can change things with it, as I said. In relation to, do you want me to answer the question about the varnish? Okay, yes, you can paint over varnish. Obviously the process, the first thing you do obviously is wash down the item with sugar soap, make sure it's completely dry, and then you put a coat of Zinsser bin, which is a stain blocker, primer and undercoat. And then if you wish to use satinwood paints, you just give it 2 coats of satinwood. If you wish to go the more laborious route and more inexpensive route, would be to use 2 coats of emulsion over the Zinsser bin, and then give it a final coat of Polyvine, which is a water-based acrylic varnish. And the beauty of that is it comes in matte, satin and gloss finish. You can also get in a wax finish. But the beauty of it is really, it does not discolor the paint that's underneath it. So what I mean by that is if you were to paint, put emulsions, or even with satin woods, put on, you decided you want to put a coat of varnish over it. If you were to say, for argument's sake, put a coat of Ronseal clear varnish over it, it would give a yellow hue off it when it dries out. So it distorts the color that's underneath it. Whereas if you use water-based acrylic varnish, that does not happen. The color there's no discoloring whatsoever with the finish. I hope that's of help.
That's Zinsser bin and Polyvine, is it?
Zinsser bin would be their first coat, which it's you can get it in methylated spirits version, and you get it in the water-based version. The only difference between the two of them is it's 15 minutes drying time for the methylated and 30 minutes for the water-based. It's the only difference. Yes, probably if you're using, just say for argument's sake, if you're using the, you wanted to upcycle your kitchen doors and they had the vinyl finish, possibly put the methylated spirits version onto that because it's a better adhesion to the plastics. Yes, the water-based version will work, but from speaking to certain people, they tell me that the methylated spirits version is better for the plastics. And then obviously do your final coats.
Great. I have another question for you, Dave. Someone is asking, when buying furniture to upcycle, what should you look out for? What would be the dangerous signs, like woodworm or cracks, or is there anything else to keep?
Well, it depends on your skill, really, and what you want to do with it. You could buy it, for want of a better word, a heap of sticks and bring them home and reassemble it and make it back into the beauty that it was before it was taken apart. That's labor intensive, obviously. Very rewarding, and and it's a labour of love, that type of project. The one thing I would really look out for, especially if you're in an antique shop, and you're buying again, just say for argument's sake, a tall boy, look at the back of it, because most of those products would have plywood backs, and Woodward just loves plywood, thrives on it. So they're the type of things you look out for. Cracks, again, yes, you can buy them with cracks, but it's really how much you want to put into that product when you buy it. Some people spend months on products and have a beautiful finish at the end of it, and they might upcycle and paint it rather than varnish it. Obviously French polishing is another way to go. I've no experience myself in that, but and there's very few good French polishers left around the world in this country at the moment. We do have one here, Jerry Griffin, probably one of the best polishers in Ireland at the minute, and he gives a fantastic finish. But they're the type of things that are outside the scope of a DIY person, but they can do all the work up to that.
Yeah.
And they can do everything, and then for the final stage, just give it to somebody professional to finish it off. Or if you wish to paint it, that's perfect as well. They manage to paint themselves, no problem. But it's the final details of really high class stuff. That's what you give to a professional just to finish out. But you can do all the rest of it, strip it down, take time, and it is really take time. And the most important thing, as I said all along from the very start, is your preparation. If your preparation is right, your finish will be perfect.
Brilliant. Yeah, always preparation. Chris, while you're free there, I might come back to you. You were going to say how repair cafes have pivoted during lockdown, and there's a bunch of other discussions happening around libraries of things, so you might just quickly explain the library of things in Belfast as well.
Sure. So thanks very much, and sorry for ducking out. The perils of doing something on a Saturday when everyone is at home. We're primarily a volunteer run project. We just have a tiny bit of staff capacity. So really during lockdown, things ground to a halt because people weren't available and a lot of our volunteers were shielding. And then during the autumn there, we just developed some online activities. We started a fortnightly mend and pile meetup, so people can just come with their mending, sewing jobs that need doing. Some of our experienced stitchers are there to kind of offer some tips if you're not sure how to tackle a mend. And that's been just a really lovely space and just a really nice community space as well for people to have a bit of company while you get around to your mending, because it can be the kind of thing that the pile gets bigger and bigger and you never really seem to find a moment to get to it. So we were just trying to create that little bit of space through the autumn and winter to slow down. So we've run that. We're doing another one this Thursday. If you're interested in joining, just drop us an email and we can send you the details, or you can find it on Eventbrite. And then we're going to pause that for the summer. And then we've done some other bike workshops just as the spring came around online again, just helping people learn how to maintain their bike and do simple repairs on it. We're not back to face-to-face events yet, but we're figuring it out. Obviously, kinds of events where lots of people come together and they touch a lot of things to try and fix them and pass them around. You know, there are so many issues to think about in terms of this context that we're in. But we're working on it and trying to figure out how we can do that. So we hope that we'll find a way to be back, before too long. In terms of libraries of things, yes, I was involved in setting up the Belfast Tool Library, which has been going for 1.5 years now. And it's obviously primarily tools rather than all kinds of things, but it takes a fairly broad definition of tools. So there's sewing machines there and things like ladders and trolleys and things that are useful for kind of not just DIY, but other kinds of purposes. And that's been a really great project and has grown exponentially, particularly since the start of the year. Actually, people have got a lot of interest there. It also has a workshop space, which we're hoping as soon as it's safe, we can open that and start to run classes in some of these practical skills. So yeah, definite overlap with kind of repair and the kind of skills side of things. But through the Belfast Tool Library, we're also plugged into a network of libraries of things all over the UK, and there are an increasing number of those projects. So we've kind of learned a lot about how to do things and what works and different models, and certainly there's a huge rise and a huge lot of interest in this. So it is a great time to start exploring these possibilities. It involves a fair bit of thinking through getting set up, and the insurance can be a tricky issue. It was very difficult to get the tool library insured this year, to be honest. But I think if you can crack that one, it's great. Someone's asking what the most popular items to buy. I'm sure it depends where you're based and what your kind of local audience is, but I think the most common items are things that you need to use once in a while, but are bulky to store. So it's things like large tools that you, not like maybe your lawnmower that you need to use every, you know, quite often, but things that you only need maybe once or twice a year, or for a particular job. Those seem to be the most common items, but also things that people maybe want to try out to see if they want to make an investment. It's a great way to, you know, borrow a bread maker to see if you're really going to get into bread making or if it's just something you want to do. And I'm kind of involved as well in a repair and share project in Bath in England, and they have a library of things. They were able to get a high street shop that wasn't being used, that was owned by the council, and the council gave it to them for next to nothing. So they've been able to operate a library of things out of that space. They do cargo bike deliveries, so the item can be dropped on your doorstep. You don't even need to drive into the town to pick it up. And they have certainly found power tools and things for special events are really important. So people are keen to get maybe a gazebo for an event in the garden, or extra chairs. They also have things like suitcases or camp beds, or things you might, again, use once in a while, but you're not kind of using all the time. And they're really awkward to store, and it's really not worth buying for that one-off, but you can actually reduce a lot of waste by making those things easily available to people when they need them, and that they don't need to own them, because what we really need is access to those things. We don't really need ownership.
Absolutely. And, you know, it would just be so great to see more libraries of things here and repair cafes here. But as you said, there are some tricky insurance issues to get around, I guess, in terms of libraries of things. I'm not aware of any at the moment, apart from sort of maybe informal neighborhood groups, or you know, those lovely kind of book boxes that you get in different places where people leave a book and take a book. But it's great to have the connection with Repair Cafe Belfast and Belfast Tool Library to kind of see if we can take some lessons and see how to do more here. There are a couple of repair cafes to my knowledge, and I think they've been in touch with you too, Chris, around the country, from Greystones, is it, and one in Clonmel, I think, as well. But nothing happening very regularly to my knowledge. It would be great to see more, for sure.
Yeah, we've certainly had inquiries from people in Sligo and Cork and Limerick as well. So like, we haven't really had we have supported some communities here in Northern Ireland to get started, and that's been great. We've sort of figured out how best we can support, and you know, the kind of useful experience. So much about a repair cafe, it is a really community-based project, and it's so important that it's embedded in its local community and reflects the local circumstances. But of course, there's a lot you can learn from someone who's already been on that journey, and you can kind of short circuit things, so you get the best of both worlds, I think. But we haven't had a lot of capacity to follow up with people in the south who've got in touch, so I don't really know where those projects are at, but I know that there's interest out there, you know, and if we could kind of bring people together and maybe crack some of these tricky issues, maybe it would be possible to get more going, because it really ticks so many of the boxes. You know, it's a great community space. You're getting stuff repaired that would otherwise go to waste. You're kind of helping with climate emissions from not having to make so much stuff in the first place. Quality volunteering opportunities, sharing skills. It's just like, it's such a brilliant project.
Yeah, hopefully we'll find a way around that, for sure. And I should mention, there is a online exchange platform called weshare.ie. That is a place for sharing. It's an online app, very small. It's mostly Dublin based, unfortunately, at the moment, but it is a way to lend things as well, to peer-to-peer lending. Audrey, we're nearly out of time, but Audrey, I have a couple of questions here for you as well, around sewing. So someone's asking, do you need a sewing machine to do alterations, or can you hand stitch, or is that too difficult, or does it take too long? And then also, do you give sewing classes in the Rediscovery Centre?
I'll answer the second one first. Yes, we do. We always have sewing classes here at the Rediscovery Centre. You can check out our website to find out when they're on exactly. Erin is the manager here of our fashion workshop, so she runs most of them. Of course, you can sew by hand. You don't need a sewing machine. I did show you the basic stitches, and that can almost sew anything. Now, if you're going to sew a dress from scratch, you'll just have to make sure that you have really firm stitches, like the back stitch or whatever, and use the appropriate stitch at the appropriate place. Like for a hem, use a slip stitch. And, you know, so yes, for different projects, depends on the project, depends on the fabric, Depends on your skill, but I think everybody can do those basic skills that I have shown you today, that you have watched and seen. And they're quite easy and very inexpensive. And a lot of people are afraid of sewing machines. I think they're afraid they'll break down. So unless you physically break down yourself, you can definitely use a needle and thread. And it's lovely to sit down and, you know, make something or mend something with just a thread and a needle. Yeah, it's quite easy.
The other thing I find, if you're under a little bit of time pressure, or if you're kind of being harassed by kids or rushing out the door and need to, the hand sewing can just be really quick sometimes too, if you're not always a thorough job, but a quick job.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no getting the sewing machine ready unless you have a studio and you just go whizzing by. But actually, a sewing machine takes a little bit of getting used to. I sometimes think that it does everything wrong until you get used to the machine. Everything goes wrong. The bobbin gets stuck, the thread comes out, the needles break. So it kind of knows that you're new. So hand sewing kind of gets away from that. And, you know, if it's a hidden invisible one, nobody can see how perfect or not perfect it is. It serves its purpose, its function. If it stays together, that's perfect. Just don't breathe very much and, you know, walk little short steps so don't rip. But no, it works great, yeah.
Brilliant. We'll maybe wrap up then with any last tip or words on repair. Audrey, do you want to start with that one? Just one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Take away.
The biggest tip is just give it a go. You know, try out one simple stitch, put two little simple things together, see how they go, see how you feel about it. Come in to us, we'll give you a needle and thread, we'll show you how to do it. And yeah, give everything a go. And you know, you can be creative and you'll be surprised at how talented you really are. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mark?
My advice would be kind of practice before you need to. So practice, like, for example, today, taking a tire off before the tube is punctured and your bike no longer works. Put in the practice so when you do have to make the repair, you're not learning while also trying to repair at the same time. Have the knowledge ready to go for when anything goes wrong, and just keep an eye on the bike, make sure check it regularly.
It's a really great tip. Thank you. And Chris?
Such great tips already. I would say, you know, as Audrey said, it doesn't need to be perfect all the time. And actually sometimes a working repair, even if it's not the most beautiful, is a great repair because you've got something that still works. And the other thing is you don't always have to do it yourself, you know, team up, meet people who know what they're doing, and you don't need to have all the skills yourself if you know someone else who can help you get something fixed.
Brilliant, thank you. And lastly, Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Yes, so really, like, just do not be afraid. Like, take your little projects on and take your time, and it's not a race. And just as I said earlier on, do your prep, and you'd be really surprised with the results you get if you just give yourself a bit of time and give yourself a bit of credit, really, for taking on. Like, a lot of people are daunted by taking apart the unit and putting it back together again. It's practice, and you can read up on it in many places. We'll help you here if we can. By all means, you can email us. We'll answer any questions you have, and just take your time and enjoy it and have fun doing it. And you will actually come up with some really nice products. And look around the house. I'm sure you'll find, if I was to challenge us all to go home today and look for one product out of your house, one item or furniture that you could upcycle, I guarantee you'll be coming back to me with 10 or 20 items that you don't need to throw out, that you can actually give a new lease of life to.
Brilliant, thank you. And absolutely credit to everyone here for sharing an interest in repair and giving it a go. And one last shout out just mentioned in the chat there to repairmystuff.ie. If you're really struggling with a repair and want to find someone who can do it for you, to check out that repair directory, which is all online, where you can bring your things that need repair. So with that, I will hand back to Ed. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you so much for facilitating that conversation there. It was quite inspiring and quite motivating. I think we're all feeling a little bit more pumped to get out there and learn more repair skills and repair our things. So guys, that's the end of the session now. I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. It couldn't have went as well if it wasn't for all the participation, all the great questions and all the chats throughout it. It's been really enjoyable to host this today. Big shout out to the team and everybody who got involved. Thanks again to Claire and Chris for taking time out. Your kids are gorgeous, by the way. And of course, the Rediscovery Centre team, everybody behind the background, as well as everybody that you see, Mark, Dave, and especially Audrey, who kind of brainchild this whole idea. She's very passionate about repair. And I can tell you, you got to keep an eye on our social media, because there's going to be lots more stuff happening, and she's going to want to bring people into the centre for some hands-on activities as soon as possible. So once again, this has been brought to you by the Rediscovery Centre, based in Ballymun. Check us out on social media, and also by the EPA, who partnered with us in delivering all these events. It's been great, and we hope to see you again soon at our next session. So bye for now, and see you soon. Happy repairing, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.